Might take a few for people to start streaming and coming in. I didn't for some reason I didn't put notifications out there or anything. I don't know if you did.
No, I didn't.
So we're just going in fresh.
Hey, that's all right.
I guess we'll just wait a few for some people to find the video and start getting in here. Start streaming it. I think I got everything set up. Everything good on your end? Did you find it and everything?
Yep, I just pulled it up.
Okay, perfect.
There's two handsome guys on the screen.
I know, right?
That doesn't draw all the viewers. I don't know what will.
Well, it is a Wednesday night at 7 o'clock, so I don't know how mainstream of a time frame this is, but we're gonna go for it, right?
I'll remind your viewers that you chose this time.
Hey, wait, before we go into that, how long have we been trying this?
It's been a little while, a few weeks.
Half, 2 months?
2 months. Downplaying it a little bit.
Hey, I was just happy when you finally had a chance. I took the nearest date and nearest time possible.
Yeah, I don't fault you for that. I've been very difficult to get a hold of at the end of the school year, but
yeah, and I can imagine why.
Things are slowing down and I love it.
Yes. What do you mean slowing down? Are you not 100% done yet?
Oh no, we're done. But
okay.
I'm just finishing up some projects. We do have some like curriculum based stuff that we're working on.
Okay.
Wrapping up all the loose ends of things that I was pushing off to the side, like the backlog of videos that I've been planning on making, stuff like that.
Yeah, I got it. Oh, of course. All right, well, we're going to get started. So as everyone can see, it's in here, and anyone that comes in, special guest tonight, we have Pokemon Classics. I know the title's a little clickbaity, the modern versus vintage. We're really just going to have a good discussion about kind of all different things. It's not going to be super combative or anything like that, but got you to click. But I'm gonna let him introduce himself. Anyone that doesn't know him, I don't know why you wouldn't if you're in the Pokemon space. But if you don't know his channel, I'll let Pokemon Classics tell you a little about himself. Go ahead.
Well, hey, everybody, this is Pokemon Classics, and thanks, Alex, for having me onto your channel tonight to talk some Pokemon. It's one of my favorite things to do. For those of you that don't know me, I'm primarily a vintage collector, mainly the Wizards of the Coast sets. I started out back in 1999 when Pokemon was first released here in English. Went in kicking and screaming. I didn't think it was something that I wanted to be a part of, but all of my friends were fully down with Pokemon cards, and by default, I just got sucked into it. And when I got into it hard. So collecting, running a league, trading, playing the game with friends, even was part of the Pokemon Tour back in 2001. It was a qualifier for the Super Trainer Showdown, which at the time was basically the equivalent of Worlds. So have a deep and pretty diverse history in Pokemon. I never really quit or left the hobby. I continued collecting throughout, a little bit less degree through some of those later years, high school, college. But since 2011, that's when I started buying collections off eBay and grading cards and trying to take my collection goals from a child and finally fulfill them once I had the discretionary income to do so as an adult. From there, it became developing a store and working on this YouTube channel, sharing my collection with the world. And that brings me to here today, which I think is the pinnacle of all things Pokemon, is being on a live stream here with Nostalgianomics. So that's my story. That's my background, and I'm sticking to it.
So, okay. So that's definitely a lot different than my story. I never got high up in the competitive play like that. And I also didn't stay in the whole time or get in heavy back in as early as 11. So I guess my first question is, what have you seen the biggest changes have been in both 5-year stretches? So basically from 2011 to 16, kind of when I got in, 15, 16, when, Evolutions, Pokemon Go, everything was blowing up. And then also from, 16 until somewhere around now, like what have been the biggest changes in those two stretches, in your eyes, someone that's been here for them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the biggest change in that 2011 to 2016 period was a sort of this discovery phase for Pokemon where you could go onto eBay and find collections really easily. the prices of things were significantly cheaper. And it was such a small community of collectors that pretty much everyone had to coordinate with other people if you were going to accomplish some of those collection goals. So it was definitely a thing where you had to have the connections and know the people because it was so small to do that. Grading was also a relatively new endeavor. And so that was something that I was learning throughout that earlier stage. Then coming into 2016 to present, I think that's where we saw Pokemon really solidified or endorsed as a hobby. It got some of that mainstream recognition, and people started seeing it less as this like underground hobby of just a handful of people to something that had a larger mainstream interest. So I would say that it really went from being in that like self-establishing phase to now something that actually has some basis, some foundation behind it.
And so do you have, cards or items that you've held since 2011 and you still own today?
Actually, probably a majority of my collection. Maybe not a majority because there's a lot of cards that I've gotten shortly thereafter, but a lot of my graded collection, some of the earlier ones, have been with me ever since 2011 when I sent out my first few PSA submissions. So, yeah, I don't even know if I could quantify it, but pretty large chunk.
Yeah, and so it kind of brings me to the question I had. So kind of going into, the video about the modern versus vintage you did, and obviously you reached out to me and you wanted to, kind of shout out the things I said and kind of break them down. And I think that was kind of one of the, I guess, points I was trying to make when I was kind of going back and forth with PK. And I think you could kind of dive into this a little better for us, is I like to show the numbers a lot of either from 16 time on, and then, or also the here and now. And so basically what was the market like, from 11 to 16 compared to 16 on? Because the reason I like to show that is because most of the growth, it hadn't happened until 16, right? And so, I feel like looking at a 2011, 2016 market is almost completely different than looking at a 2016 to 22 market. And so give me your thoughts on that and how much different, it has been, or because you've seen it. I mean, you have cards that you saw grow for 5 years from 16 to, or 11 to 16, and then another 5 years from 16 to present. And I'm sure it's a lot different. So what's your perspective on that with, we're still talking about vintage, not modern, just, vintage in general.
Yeah, that's a difficult question to answer because it's going to vary based on specific cards or specific items that we're looking at. But if we're talking 2011, 2012, a lot of those first edition PSA 9 Wizards of the Coast holographics, not base set, but we're talking Gym Heroes, Gym Challenge, Fossil, Jungle, etc., might have been $20 or $30 in a PSA 9. So there has been substantial growth there, but you have to keep in mind too that that was a lot more money to shell out at the time because you couldn't turn around and flip things like you could today. But then other cards had appreciated quite a bit. If you look at some of the even first edition base set holographics in PSA 9, I think I bought the Blastoise in PSA 9 already graded for $100 in 2012. That's what it cost at the time. And between then and 2016, I don't know, maybe it was pushing $700, $1,000, somewhere in there. So that's still a pretty substantial growth. But I think what we saw throughout 2011 to 2022 to present is it tends to be this really gradual linear growth. I think it's a more stable type of growth over time as we watch these cards go from $30 in a PSA 9 to maybe 40 to 50 to 60. And most people don't reflect on that as massive growth because it's not these astronomical numbers, but it was relatively stable. But then they're insert these catalysts, whether it was Pokemon Go in 2016, creating a massive upward trajectory. And then again in 2021 with the 25th anniversary, with the pandemic and with everything else happening. And again, we get that major swing upwards. And in both situations too, I think we've seen that pretty substantial correction after those. I remember people having these conversations in 2017 saying oh, the Pokemon Go bubble popped, it's crashed, it's never going to see these highs ever again. And those same vintage cards then by late 2017, early 2018, were back up to those prices. And for some people, they didn't think that they would ever achieve those prices ever again, that it was an anomaly. Then 2021 just blew it out of the water. So I'm always hesitant to say like where the peak is or where the market value is going to look in the long term. I do feel more comfortable talking about short term and looking at some of the like, I don't know, the trends. And that's one trend that I've seen play out at least 3 different times is those large catalysts for growth. And then a little bit of back to reality, figuring out where that line should be for stability.
Yeah. And I think that's where I was trying to get at with, I know you talked about kind of, which is true, is kind of whatever data set you pick to show can kind of fudge the numbers the way you want them to look. And it wasn't really my intention to like just pick a data set that made my opinion or argument look right. The reason I picked 2016 is because I feel like because the Pokemon Go, the evolutions, that boom is what brought such a large amount of people that are still in the hobby today in. And so I felt like that's the most fair kind of spot to look at moving forward, because kind of like you were saying, it's anytime before that, like 15 through 11, anytime before that, you could have bought these cards at just dirt cheap prices. And so I just, in my opinion, I guess, obviously if you look back 10 years, it's still going to show vintage, performing amazingly. And so I guess in my opinion, I just feel like to look back, kind of pre 2016, it's so difficult to look at because, anyone who got in the hobby, in that big boom was never going to see those prices. They never did see them and they're never going to see those again. And so I just feel like, kind of looking at the time most people got in until now is probably a little better data point than to look back at like, talking about we're buying these cards in 2011 for $20 and now they're worth 2,000, things like that. And so that's really the idea I was trying to get across, more than just, cherry picking the exact point in time where I could make a modern product look better than a vintage. Because it really wasn't my intention. My only intention was to kind of show the data that isn't really talked about as much, because I try to kind of err on the side of the new collectors and new people in the hobby, or people that at least got it when I did. And I feel like so much of the time, there's a lot of people who have large positions in vintage, and it's always talked about how kind of like the good old days, like I bought these cards for X, Y, and Z. I graded these raw and I've made X amount of percent, thousands of percent gain. And I think people hear that so much and, they kind of buy those cards because they've seen all that. But it's, the more realistic approach is, hey, that was before all the craziness. It's not realistic that those cards are going to do that again. Like, for a card to go from $20 to $200, right? It's like 10 times, maybe like $1,000 card going to 10,000, which is a lot more unlikely, right? And so I think that was more of my, what I was trying to show. What was your kind of take on it? I mean, you gave your take on the video, but what was your take? Did you think I was just trying to, more or less make vintage look bad, or what was your take on it? I'd love to hear that.
No, so I would start with a few different points. First, I think I heard you make the argument in the follow-up with PK that you acknowledge that if you had cards that were raw and you're able to grade them and get a decent return on the condition, like get some 10s and some 9s, that's probably the best value if you're able to do that. And so I appreciate that, because I think that there is truth to that, at least historically. I don't know how easy that'll be moving forward. It's certainly gotten substantially more difficult than it was earlier on, when that type of mint raw product was littered all over and the competition for it was relatively minimal. So I think that's a good point. I would be a little bit cautious, though, if we're using a specific duration to measure the value of cards and how they've appreciated. And in the case of that one video, you did choose like the peak coming after like the most substantial increase in vintage cards, and then measured it against the few years where that peak was restabilizing after, massive growth. So I don't think that's a normative timeline to use for making that assessment of whether or not they're investable in the long term. Because even if we chose like 2011 to 2016, there's pretty substantial growth there, but it was a lot more linear, and it wasn't nearly the type of growth that we saw in one of those large catalysts. So if you're going to measure from the peak down to the trough, to me, that seems a little bit disingenuous. I don't think you had a bad motive for choosing that timeline. But, if we're talking about modern product, you're basically measuring it from its entry point, wherever you take it from, because that's where it starts. That's where it originates. And that's generally going to be the lowest cost that that product will ever see, unless for some reason people decide like nobody wants it anymore. Nobody wants to open it. Nobody wants to collect it. And I think that's one of the things that Modern has for it is there's always that sense of utility where you can collect sealed product. You can open that sealed product. You can use it for streaming. You can use it for competitive play. You can grade the cards once you open it. It has so many different things available to it. It's probably not going to fall too substantially from that entry price.
Yeah. And so I guess that was kind of one of the biggest things I was going back and forth with PK about, which I don't know if we ever really squashed it. We kind of, I guess I agreed to disagree. But so I just want to get your take on that is I'm trying to compare like to like, right? So basically, take the past out of it is like right now, here and now, when people ask, well, what's the best place to put, $80 or $100? And, he kept saying, well, you could have done this and graded that. And now it's worth this. It's like, well, you could have, right? But it's like right now though, like what, an $80 or $100 booster box, what kind of card could you realistically buy for $80 or $100 that you see performing better? And that's really the kind of the area I was trying to get to is, or you could choose $1,000 card and you could, pick, a case and a half or a couple cases of booster boxes at $500 a case. It's like, so if you could buy 12 booster boxes at $1,000, what card, would you rather buy right now for that same price that you feel is going to do better? And so I would just like to get your kind of opinion on that is like, how do you navigate through, like, I know you have a great deal of, inventory, great deal of product that you had from back then, but, putting money into the market now, do you still see that? Like, would you still see that as a good play at the prices they're at now?
Yeah, man, you're really throwing the big questions here. I do like my background is being able to assess and appraise collections and find the value in them prior to being graded. And so I do still feel pretty confident in my ability to do that well. It's all basically a calculated risk of looking at like, what's the potential here? How much money am I in this for as my entry point? Then you kind of extrapolate what the market could do based on past performance. But I mean, that's all anybody's doing is we're guessing on probabilities. I do think that Modern has performed significantly better than I would have thought. It's not something that I typically track extensively. And so watching some of your videos, that is something that I've mentioned in some of my own is like, it surprises me how well some of these boxes appreciate in the short term. I'm still a little bit skeptical on the long term, like what that's going to look like 2 years out, 5 years out, 10 years out, especially in the current situation where, I mean, just this last fiscal year, Pokemon produced 9.1 billion cards, which is 300% more than its next biggest year, which was the previous year. So I don't know. I don't know if that supply is going to be able to be absorbed by the market in the long term, especially if Pokemon continues those production numbers. Having said that, as I've already acknowledged, I think the downward risk is relatively low. And that is one of the things that I appreciate you acknowledging to your audience is like, this is why I'm suggesting this, because if you don't want to risk 20 grand in a lower end trophy card, well, you could start small with some boxes. And I guess worst case scenario, if it were me and I had some vintage boxes that I got in for $200 and maybe nobody ever wanted Team Rocket anymore and I had 3 boxes laying out there, well, great. I'm going to open them and appreciate the cards because I'm also a collector. I'm not just an investor. So I see your point there and I think it's a valid one. I don't know if I would feel comfortable parking my money in Modern just because it's not something I have experience in. And the situation right now, I don't think is necessarily comparable to what the past has looked like. It's probably not for vintage either. So in all fairness, I don't really know. And I generally don't like to extrapolate too much what the future is going to look like besides relying upon past historical data. And that is the one benefit of vintage is you do have some past historical data to look at.
Yeah, that past historical data, that's another big hot button issue is, my biggest question to a lot of the finance channels and Pokemon investing channels, right, is, everyone has these, I mean, I know it's hard to, compare it to stocks because they're companies, they produce things, but, everyone always uses the argument of, well, these mutual funds or funds have track records of 10, 15, 20 plus years, right? And so my question always is well, then at what time can you finally admit that Pokemon's proven, has a track record? Like, is it 10 years of investing, 15 years, 20 years? Like, at what point do things have to happen enough times to say, okay, this is proven over 20 years. This is usually what this is, 99% what's going to happen unless a catastrophic event changes it. So, I mean, not modern, just vintage, anything. Like, what's your opinion on that about, like, at what point are we going to have to admit to ourselves and kind of everyone's going to have to agree that, okay, there's enough track record for this to be considered investable?
Yeah, that question I think is a bit easier, and one that I think most people would answer the same way. And Pokemon has had a really strong history. Even if you go back to 2011, like there is a demand there. There has been a consistent demand for 11 plus years. And over that time, that demand has only grown. We've seen the consumer base grow from multiple different generations, whether it's the millennial generation or Generation Z or these younger kids. I'm not sure what the next generation is technically called, Generation Alpha or something like that, but entering the mix as well. And it's a very popular franchise. So I think the long-term outlook for Pokemon is really strong. It is the highest grossing media franchise of all time. And I don't know. I think I'm pretty bullish in the long term. The short term is what gets me, because we do have some larger macroeconomic issues going on in the country. We are seeing this major surge in production from modern Pokemon, as well as an unprecedented boom from vintage. And I don't know how sustainable that'll be in the short term. Personally, I think there's going to be a large consolidation phase where people panic sell, or there's just so much supply injected all at once that some of the items that are actually highly desirable get kind of swept into the mix with that, going for lower values. And eventually the savvy investors, the experienced collectors will swoop in and find those deals, and I think either add those items to their collections because they've always wanted them, or put it aside as something to invest in and go, let's see what happens in 10 years.
Yeah, so and that's like kind of like a misconception I get so much, is that if people that find my channel for the first time is like, because I'm so bullish on modern, it's just like, oh, that's all I've ever done is modern. And, obviously I started out with just vintage. I mean, that's all I knew growing up. That's all I knew. The first modern set I ever opened was Evolutions. That was the first modern set I ever invested in. I mean, from then it moved on to, multiple sets, and, I was trying to collect one every booster box and things like that. But really, majority of all my grading is all been done on WotC. Basically, I don't know, 95% of my grading is all WotC. All the, sealed boxes, all these sealed theme decks, like blister packs, booster packs, it was all WotC. And so I wanted to ask you a question on that, is that basically I was just collecting and, like, I guess, eventually investing in everything that I grew up with, that I knew, that I liked, that I had a connection to and a passion for, right? And so, I mean, I've said this before, that, I mean, if I had, like, all the money in the world, yeah, I'd want to go back and collect and invest in all that stuff. But even if I had all the money in the world, I don't even know if I really care enough about the trophies and these one-off Japanese exclusives and all these cards that, like, there's some of them that, like, Jake or like SM Pratt will show, and I will never have seen that card before. I'll say, oh wow, look, what's up with that? And so it's like there's some of these cards out there that you're almost being told to like because it's so rare. But at the end of the day, how many people actually like it and actually are going to want that card? Like, I understand they're going to want base set Charizard first edition. They're going to want, like, the evolutions and jungle. They're going to want a lot of these cards, like maybe like the shinings or the golds. There's a lot of cards they're going to want because they mean something to them. They have nostalgic nature, whatever. They grew up, they played with them. But like, what's your opinion on these, like, god tier rarity trophies, exclusives, all that type of stuff, to where the majority of people, a common person that's in Pokemon, doesn't even really know what that card is. It has no connection to them. And even if they do get into a point where they are making a large amount of money, are they really going to put their money into those things? What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I was watching a YouTube video recently, and this one wasn't Pokemon related. It was like a sports card channel, but they were talking about, like, the journey of a collector, and they used a X and Y axis bar graph to show how generally vintage collectors and sports collectors and video game collectors kind of navigate within a hobby. And they suggested that models indicate that most people first enter a hobby out of nostalgia. They find some item, a one-off something that they buy because it reminds them of happier times of their childhood, whatever. And then from there, a lot of times people will look at, well, what's the current stuff? And so they eventually migrate over and buy a bunch of modern cards, modern products, modern stuff before then consolidating, maybe liquidating some of the collection, and then actually looking for the rarity and scarcity piece. I don't know if this is like a play at elitism from some, or if it's just as you get more immersed and more attentive to a hobby, you want to have that connection to its past, to its history. Maybe part of it is wanting to, have that sense of ownership of something that's has some exclusivity to it. There are psychological studies that talk about exclusivity driving collecting to begin with. But I do think that that's something that becomes a somewhat natural route for people, especially those that have the disposable income, is to seek out those items that are truly historical, that are important to the hobby in some way, shape, or form. I mentioned this in one of my videos, but you see it in like Magic the Gathering, where there's a lot of kids and a lot of younger audiences that didn't grow up with alpha and beta sets, but yet those are the ones that demand the most demand. You see it with video games, vintage video games. I don't know if you're familiar with like the 1993 Nintendo World Championship cartridge.
Yeah.
I've never played. Well, I guess I played a little bit of original NES, but we're talking like really young childhood there. But I think the story behind that is really fascinating. It's really cool. So I don't know. The trophy cards never really appealed to me so much because they're out of my league. If I suddenly won the lottery and had millions of dollars to throw around, would I approach some of those things? I think I would, just because like Pokemon is so important to me and is an interesting hobby to me that if I could be even more immersed into some of its history, I probably would be interested in that. But for now, I'm happy just to deal with what's, part of my childhood. And I think that's a great place to be for any collector.
Yeah, I wish I tried to scour YouTube to find this old it was this old what was it, like a bar, when you put your community post out, you can give like you can ask questions and people give the answers and it'll show like who voted for what in like a poll. I couldn't find it, but it was back when like the SM Pratt was really promoting his illustrator. It was back when they were maybe like 30 or 50 grand cheap, right? Compared to now. But there was like a poll that someone put out. I tried to search back and it's gone. I can't find it. But they asked, it was like a poll that said, Illustrator Pikachu or first edition base set Charizard. And the Charizard was like 80 something percent. It was like 86% of people clicked on base set Charizard. And so that's why I asked that question, is I just feel like there's a lot more, I guess, draw to the actual cards that we grew up with, that like, being the old, like I get that people, going back to vintage, like after you get in from nostalgia, you go to modern, then you want to start getting, the oldest things and the rarest things. If you have the money, I lose the correlation to where that jumps from going back to first edition base, first edition jungle, all the WotC, all that, and how that jumps to these exclusives. Like, it's just rarity? I mean, because obviously there's no nostalgia there. There's no, draw. There's nothing that actually, gives you any type of feeling. It's just, I want something that's rare and no one has. Is that what you're trying to say?
I think it's a little bit more than that. I think the reason why it appeals to such a small audience, like you mentioned, the majority of people would go for that first edition Charizard. I mean, if I'm being honest, that's what I would prefer to have as well. But I think when you're so immersed in something and you've attached so much of your identity to it, that having that connection to its history, its inception, its background becomes something that's desirable for those individuals. So you don't necessarily need a large market. You just need a dedicated market of those that are well established in that hobby. Again, this is coming from somebody that doesn't own any trophy cards, that likely never will, unless I win the lottery, as we already mentioned. So if you got the winning numbers, you can pass those to me when we're done here and we'll make that happen. But I could certainly see why people want to feel like they're connected to the items that have historical significance. And that can only happen with the items that have that level of scarcity to them, because sure, first edition Charizard does, but even that one I would say is relatively scarce if we're comparing to, the vast majority of cards that are out there. But I think it's really more of that. I think part of it is that sense of exclusivity that you alluded to, where people want that sense of superiority. But I think for more of those people, it's the ones that have dedicated so much of their identity to that thing that they want to be associated with it in a deeper, more significant way.
I got you. Okay. Yeah, it's a good answer. Like I said, I mean, I'm in the camp to where like, I can't make myself care. I've researched the trophies. I know like I know all about the stories behind it. Like I get, the copies, I get how, there's so many less than actual set cards. It's just like, even if I had the money, it's just like, I just can't make myself care. Right. Like, I mean, there's so many other things, so many other hobbies, there's so many other purchases. I feel like I would make my life if I made it. But like I said, I mean, it's good to get a perspective from someone else who, sees things differently. It's why I like doing these. Here, I have a really easy question for you.
Okay.
So you majority, a sealed guy or card guy?
Oh, majority card guy. I do have some sealed stuff, but mainly singles.
Okay, because I think that's kind of what's shaped how I am now, is because I've always been kind of more of sealed. I mean, I didn't realize until I look back, but all the things I had from my vintage collection were majority sealed. I mean, I was opening the boxes, I was grading the cards, and I was buying the collections and grading the cards. But in my mind, I was grading the cards to eventually sell one day. And I always had the idea in my mind, I'm keeping these sealed things forever. Like I had all the WotC sealed theme decks. I'm keeping these forever. Every time I was able to get a new WotC, sealed box, like, I'm keeping this in my collection forever. And I think that may, subliminally play a role in my mind with the modern, and why I'm, I guess, more bullish on sealed, is because maybe it's just my own, my own like wants or my own likeness trying to, hold sealed on a pedestal over a card. So I just want to get your idea on that. Is, you're more of a, slab or single guy. So, take modern out of the picture, even like vintage or middle era things, you still would kind of gravitate more to the cards over the actual boxes, mint boxes themselves.
Yeah, going back to my background, when I was collecting, my major goal was to collect all of the first edition Wizards of the Coast sets, from base set all the way through Neo Destiny, since that's what I grew up with. And I was able to accomplish that as a kid for the most part. A lot of first edition base set I wasn't able to find. We didn't have eBay to just log on and go, all right, what card do I need? I need Kadabra. Cool. $5, add to cart. You had to find it in the wild and actually trade for it or purchase it from a card store, and it was hard to find. But then condition became a thing for me when I started seeing cards that were graded in like 2010. I'm like, that looks really cool, and that's a good way to like save your cards, store your cards, maybe display them without worrying about them getting damaged. So then that became the goal. And then from there, it was like a race for condition to get the best possible ones. And it made the hobby a lot more interesting when buying collections and being able to grade those cards and, keep the ones that you needed for your own personal collection, flip the other ones, repeat the process. And that became part of the chase. That's the allure, I think, of any collector, is the chase itself. But to your point about sealed product, I've always felt that sealed product was a smart play. At least traditionally, even for vintage, it has been. Besides the last couple of years when we've got these major catalysts where box prices increased exponentially almost overnight. Prior to that, you could take whichever box you wanted, and it was pretty rare for it to retreat at all in price point. Most of the time, it was just a gradual, steady, linear growth. And to me, that makes a lot of sense, even if it's heavily printed, as some of those early Wizards of the Coast boxes were, like Jungle, Fossil, Team Rocket, I think might have been one of the most printed boxes. But even if it was heavily printed, you still have the sealed collectors, you still have the slab collectors, you still have people that want to open packs for live streams or for other purposes like that, people that want to piece them out. So again, it's that utility. And I don't know, I think that's a good way to go about it. It just wasn't my strategy.
Yeah, you have some collectors that like they almost insist on, I have to pull the card myself. I mean, I know you talked about, kind of buying and selling both with Gem Mint Pokemon back in the day. I mean, I know he was that way with a lot of stuff. Is he wanted to pull it himself, right? So, I mean, there's that level of people out there who really will just pay absorbent amounts for boxes to open just because they got to open it, right?
Yeah, and we've saw YouTube become a thing with entire channels based around pack openings, and I think that was another thing that added to the allure of sealed product. Is, well, now it has that possibility as well. If you're the kind of person that wants to start a channel or do some like, I don't know. I'm a boomer. I don't know all the technologies these days, but you want to be on Instagram Live or on Whatnot or whichever platform you're on opening stuff. There's a market for that, and it's a really fun thing to do.
You're being modest. You got like some of the best edited videos in the Pokemon space.
Well, thank you for that, but don't let the editing and the visuals fool you. Still somewhat of a boomer. I mean, we already established here that you're a youngin' compared to me.
Right. So we got over 50 people in here, so I guess it's time to start pissing people off a little bit. So I got a question. This isn't about you. This is about like kind of in general, because this is the I don't know why you hear this so much in general. Is well, I'm a collector at heart, so if it goes to zero, I don't care, right? And so going back into you're talking about the condition, right? You can chase the condition. A lot of people do that. Okay. My question would be is if people don't care about the value, right? And if a PSA 10s is, random number, $1,000, but you could buy that same card as well as 10 others and nines for $1,000. Why wouldn't everyone be doing that? Why wouldn't they be getting sevens, eights, nines, poor condition? Why wouldn't they be doing that? They really didn't care about the condition. If it went to zero, it meant nothing. If it went to zero, a 10 and a nine would both be worth zero. And so my question always is what would be the point of worrying about, getting a 10 or the value of the card if really people are just collectors and they don't care about the value in reality?
Yeah, that's a valid observation. I am not one of those people that will pretend like they don't care about value, because I do. It's not the end all be all though. Like there are certain cards that are going to stay with me regardless of their value going up or their value going down, because they have sentimental value. And at the end of the day, you weigh all those values against each other, and there are certain ones that are more heavily weighed than others. Having said that, I don't think many people want to see their investment or their collection, if we're going to call it collection, go down to zero, especially after the time, the effort, the work, the money placed into it. And it is kind of nice watching things appreciate from the sideline. But also at the same time, I'm saying this from a place of somebody that had some pretty valuable cards in my collection, some of which I had duplicates of that I could have sold at the peak that I was certain were going to go down immediately afterwards. But in the case of some of them, I was like, this isn't a card that I'm easily going to replace. So I guess I'd just rather have it. If it goes down 50%, whatever, I'm cool with that. And, maybe that's a fortunate position to be in for some people where they have the financial resources. And we talked about this earlier. I'm a teacher, so it's not like I have giant money bags, kind of in a collecting stalemate where most cards that I still need are too expensive for me to buy unless I sell something else that I have, which sort of defeats the purpose. But like I said, for some items, I'm just willing to hang on to them and see what it holds for the long term. And if it doesn't ever go up to that level again that we saw in 2021, well, I'm okay with that.
And I'm really happy to hear you say that. Like, I'm happy that other people have that same mindset, because I don't know why. I think that's why I kind of get into it with some people is it just kind of makes me cringe a little bit when I hear that said over and over and over in so many different streams or videos, is that, oh, well, at the end of the day, I'm a collector. If it all goes to zero, I don't care. I like it. And it's like, I know myself. I mean, I purposely, when I, buy things for my collection, because like I said, I really don't like to quote unquote say I'm investing in slabs, because I don't really see them as good of a place to put my money as I do modern seal. That's just me. It's my opinion. But I still buy slabs because I still like to collect. I'm still a collector at heart. And even when I collect, I still like to get my hands on tens. And the reason is because I know that tens are going to perform better than the nines are on a percent, basis. And at the end of the day, if I was truly just a collector and didn't care about money, I'd buy the 987, a raw, whatever it may be, for $25, $50 instead of pay $500 for a 10, right? And so I guess that's kind of the disconnect I see right now in the community as a whole is, the disconnect between collectors and investors. And, a lot, collectors maybe want to, see investing as a bad word, when maybe, in turn, they may not even realize it, that they're doing it themselves, just in a, kind of roundabout way where you're always going to think about, getting the best prices and making sure what you're putting your money into holds its value, even if you do want something, right? I mean, or is it just me, or is that basically where you're coming from too?
No, I agree. And I think that's one of the problems you've run into with talking to some other YouTubers out there, or even in the comments or in the chats, is how we define investing. Because for a lot of people, they define it differently. And I think for a lot of us, it's not an either or. It's not you're either a collector, you're an investor. It's a hybridization of both of them. And you might lean more heavily towards the collection side and go, you know what, I don't really care in the short term what this looks like, or maybe even in the long term. But I don't think anybody would be too thrilled if they saw their vast collection that they spent a large portion of their life assembling and investing, we'll use that word, or purchasing cards to attain, and watch it go to zero. Like that is a bit of a heartbreaking thing. But at the same time, I think there's a number of people out there that care more about the personal value, the sentimental value, where if it declines significantly, that they're okay with that. And I think that's a good, healthy position to take because ultimately we can't control what the markets do. And so if we're going to let the markets dictate our sense of happiness, well, then maybe you are an investor, but in the worst possible way rather than the healthy, productive way of thinking about both. Because there's a lot of markets you could be involved in if your only goal was to make money. And I'm not sure Pokemon would be like the ideal market to go into if that was your only concern. There's something here that probably brought you here, and that's probably some sort of passion or love for the hobby. And so I think having both of those is important.
Oh yeah, I think if you can match what any other investment can do with Pokemon, I think that's just the win-win. I mean, you get to actually hold and enjoy something you love. You can display it, you can enjoy it every day, and it's still going to keep up with, inflation or whatever it may be. That's, I think, the goal, right? I mean, I think that's kind of the tops. I mean, if we do get those huge stonks and craziness, like, yeah, that's just luck. But I mean, that was kind of my goal when I first got in way back when is, I saw things, move, like you said, from 2011 to 16, it was like kind of steady over time. And I was seeing that. I'm like, well, hey, this is safer than, I mean, not safer, but this is better to keep my money sitting in a savings account. I might as well buy things I like and enjoy them. And hey, they're looking like they're going up over time. But where would you think you stand? You think these are investments, or you think it's just, you're collecting stuff and if it goes up, yay. If not, I don't care. Or do you actively, like, maybe every quarter, year, I mean, do you keep track of where your things are performing, and do you sell based on that? Like, how do you kind of handle your, I guess, portfolio, as you would call it?
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated. For my personal collection, I sometimes track over a year, over a couple of years, estimated values, just for my own personal knowledge. And some years are up, some years like this one are down. And I'm okay with that because, again, the enjoyment that I get from them for my personal collection is why I got them in the first place. So that's okay. Other items I am actively selling. I do have an eBay store, and usually those are the extras that I acquire through collection purchases, and I sell the extras, and that funds the habit, the addiction of buying new cards. Others I look at just as opportunities. Sometimes when I see a collection, maybe there's no cards there that I specifically need, but I'm like, there's some decent stuff here. I kind of want this. And maybe some of that will enter my collection, maybe not. Sometimes it's grade dependent, but I would say it's a hybridized approach. I have my primary goals, and those goals have been relatively unchanged since I started collecting, even way back to 1999. But at the same time, if you can make a little bit of money, or you can break even, like you said, and do something you enjoy, and then have the added benefit of being part of this community online, talking to different people, sharing that passion. Like, this was something that was unfathomable just 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And that's probably the thing that I like the best about collecting Pokemon cards, is that now it's become this social thing, where it used to be like, you didn't tell anybody that you collected Pokemon because there was stigma to it. Now it's something to wear as a badge of honor. And like, sometimes people are fascinated by that, even people that don't collect themselves. Pokemon is such a synonymous term with like pop culture that it's something that a lot of people have nostalgia for, regardless if they're that immersed into the hobby. So again, it's a little bit of everything for me.
I remember when I got back in the hobby, like, I remember trying to buy evolutions off the shelves at like Walmart. I remember feeling like so embarrassed, like looking around, walking up to the shelf and like throwing one in the cart and walking away, because there is
How did
that
that get in there? Well, I guess I'll take it.
Yeah. Or like trying to get in that checkout line and you're like, oh yeah, I'll throw one of these in the cart. Yeah. And I know it's changed so much because now it's just like normal. But back then it was like, am I seen as a weirdo for still collecting Pokemon cards? Like, how are these other adults looking at me, And like I said, I mean, I kept it in my closet. I kind of hid it from my friends. Like, no one really knew until I told one of my friends that I was still collecting and buying Pokemon cards and spending relatively large amounts of money on it. And no, I think that's the biggest thing that's changed, that's helped the hobby the most, is kind of the normalization of collecting again, right?
Yeah. And as fun as it is to like see an item sell on eBay and go to package it up and deliver it to the post office and, tape a shipping label on there, it's these type of experiences where you get to go to a place like Collecticon and hang out with a bunch of other collectors, or go on a live stream and see everybody posting in the chat and commenting back. those are the things that I think make this so valuable. And that's part of the reason why I'm not that perturbed if the collection drops in value a bit. Well, is it ideal? No. Is it something that I wish for? No. On the other hand, it makes some cards cheaper that I'm after still. So there is kind of a trade-off there. But on the other hand, if this were something that I was paying to actively do as a social activity, like a bowling league or something, I would gladly do that. And so I'm willing to have, the experience through it as well, in addition to the finance side.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, are you going to any CollectorCons this year?
I went to the one in Texas recently, and I'm really strongly leaning towards going to Denver.
I think I have to go to Denver. I mean, I think everyone's going, right?
That's what it sounds like. Yeah.
I think you just have to go. Yeah, I think me and my wife are probably gonna do the Denver one. I mean, it just seems like there's gonna be so many people there. I've never been to one. I just feel like if we're gonna do one at all, that's got to be the one to do, right?
It seems like it. I mean, there's only 3 left: California, Denver. Maybe it's just the 2. I feel like I'm missing one.
Yeah, and that'd be a crazy trip for where I'm at. I mean, Denver's at least somewhat closer.
Oh no, there is one more. There's the Kansas City one. That one would actually be probably the closest to me, but
that's a few hours from me. I mean, I could drive there. It's just and I may go, but I just don't really see it as big of a turnout for that, right?
Yeah, and that date didn't end up working out for me. And I know the one that's in California is the same weekend as Worlds, and a lot of people are going to Worlds, which is in London. So yeah, I think it's going to be Denver.
It's got to be Denver, right? I know everyone in the chat. Is everyone going to Denver? I want to see that light up and see if everyone's going. Did you have any topics you wanted to bring up? I know I've been kind of dominating and hitting you with question after question. Did you have anything you wanted to talk about?
Well, as long as I have you here as a captive audience and your expertise, thoughts on the Pokemon Go set?
Man, that's a rough one right now. I was pretty hyped on it. I mean, I thought it was going to be kind of like a home run set from everything we were hearing. I'm right. The wind is really coming out of the sails right now. I still think it's going to do well. I mean, I think specialty sets do well in general. It does have the Mewtwo box art. It does still have the big 3, even though they're not. It really remains to be seen how hard it's going to be to pull those cards yet. I mean, I know people are speculating and those are going to be easy cards to pull. It really remains to be seen yet. It's lackluster compared to what I was thinking they were going to do with it. To be honest with you, I mean, I do have cases of ETBs that I already have pre-ordered, so I will have, I do have position in it already. I was wanting to get more items, but the more I look, I hate to be a downer. I mean, I'm not super enthusiastic about it. I'm not I'm not hating on it. I'm not saying, oh, this is like Battle Styles, but I mean, my excitement isn't through the roof like it was before. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, that's the reason why I asked, is because when it first was announced, I was thinking this is going to be e-reader 2.0, which I thought was a really unique way of going about a set, having those scannable codes where you could, play games on the Game Boy. And it doesn't seem like they're making as much use of the Pokemon Go infrastructure, like the technology side. And maybe there's things about it that I'm not aware of yet. But I kind of like the set, and I don't collect a lot of Modern or buy a lot of Modern. But I did get into Evolutions when that came out because it had that nostalgic thrill for me. And then same with Celebrations. And I played a lot of Pokemon Go in 2016, 2017. Eventually, I just kind of let it go. I got locked out of the email address that I was using, not the Pokemon Go account itself, but that email address, because I just made one temporarily for Pokemon Go and forgot the password, never bothered getting back in. But that has a little bit of nostalgia for me too. So that's a set that I was thinking about buying some packs for and reliving some of that, but I don't know a whole lot about it.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't think it's going to be a Celebrations. I don't think it's going to be, a Hidden Fates or something like that. I originally did, but I'm just not as hyped as I used to be. I mean, I actually made a video. It's actually the most viewed video on my channel, which I think is crazy because I just made a random video about, why not to buy Astral Radiance. Don't buy Astral Radiance out of the gate. Don't pre-order Astral Radiance, right? And I mean, now we're starting to see all these cards in Astral Radiance that are crazy value, all these alt arts, like, and I'm just starting to think, man, like, am I just completely wrong on this? I get it flip-flopped? Is Astral Radiance the set and Pokemon Go is going to be the flop? It's really playing with my mind. But like I said, I still do think specialty sets do well usually out of the gate. I mean, if Shining Fates wouldn't have got, like massive reprint, I mean, it was still doing extremely well. It was $80, $100 a box. I mean, it was, over 100% already. Obviously Hidden Fates, 200% up. I mean, Shining Legends is, I don't know how many percent up that is now. I mean, almost 8x your money, maybe something like that. So, I mean, I think specialty sets do well. It's just, I don't know, because obviously the economy we're in, possibly having lackluster cards, don't know what the pull rates are going to be on those, Charizard Blastoise Venusaur card, or like, I just don't know. I'm not as excited about it. I'm not saying that it can't be. I'm not saying that it can't, have just enough people that want to open it, and because it's cheap and it could sell out and have a temporary spike. But yeah, I'm just not in the same mindset I was when I made my Pokemon Go video and I bought my cases.
All right, we'll throw one more at you about Pokemon Go set. Yeah. Artworks. You're going with the Radiant Charizard, Blastoise, or Venusaur? There's been some discussion and debate over which is the best, and I use that term loosely because there seems to be a lot of people that don't really care for the artworks. I kind of like all three of them, if I'm being honest. They have a simplicity to them that I like.
Yeah, I like all three. I mean, I'm always kind of, with Blastoise. I've kind of always been Blastoise. I've never been the Mr. Charizard guy. I understand it, and that's why I, again, just like you, went into Evolutions, went into Celebrations, bought the UPCs because of that Charizard artwork. I know what it does to people. But yeah, as far as me, I mean, it goes back to like when I was a kid. Like when we went to the card shop at the mall. My dad let me pick one card out of the case, and I chose the Blastoise. That's why we bought a Blastoise, and it just, I don't know. I used Squirtle in the game, and it's just kind of what's always came to me. So I'm probably going to stick with Blastoise. I mean, I'm sure Charizard is going to be way more valuable, obviously, but
it's a good choice. I can get behind that. In the chat, you had Ben Young say the Eevee. The Eevee looks really cool.
Is the Radiant Eevee from the boxes?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, and that one
looks cool.
Yeah, I love that one. Yeah, I'll check the chat out, see if anyone had questions. I know earlier on people did, and I didn't get to them. Let me go see. I know I missed some.
Yeah, let's answer some questions.
Let's see.
Send us your questions, everybody.
Okay, so John said, how is Pokemon Go set going to fail? Besides overprinting, what's the risks of that set? I feel like the fundamentals are great for it. Yeah, so let's be honest, any set can fail. I mean, now, what do you mean by fail? Do you mean like short-term or long-term? Because like, I think this is this is the biggest problem with every discussion about anything, whether it be, a box, a card, whatever it is. What are we talking about? Are we talking about 0 to 2 years? Are we talking about, 1 to 3 years? Are we talking about, the next 5 to 7 years? Because I'll give you different answers for all those. Like in the next 0 to 2 years, yeah, it could quote unquote fail. I mean, you could buy ETBs at $45, $50, and they could be sitting at $45, $50, or be at $40 in 6 months, a year. I mean, that can realistically happen. Now, if you're asking me in 5 years, do I not think it's going to be more expensive? I can't say that. I'd put 99.9%, my money on the fact that they will be more than $40, $45, $50 in 5 years. It's always happened. Obviously, there's no guarantees, but yeah, my predictions are going to change so much based on timelines. And so, it really depends on what you're looking at. I mean, there can be plays within that, which, I mean, I'm try and take advantage of. I mean, there can be plays where all the pre-orders sold out, and then out of the gate, the set, people like to open it. It gets opened a ton, and those box prices can go to 55, 60, 65, even 70, whatever a box. And you can, possibly flip a lot of that product and make a good margin there. But then maybe a reprint happens and it drops it again. So there's a lot of plays that can be made in that. Yeah. So short term, yeah, you can always win or lose. You can always fail or succeed. Long term, I'm always going to be a long-term bull on sealed products. So that's my opinion. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, just in general, I feel like the long-term future of Pokemon is pretty bright. You look at how extensive the user base is, the fact that you've got a lot of young collectors I mean, even we're relatively young, but there are those that are much younger than us. And as people age, they get additional discretionary income. So I think the future is pretty good across the board. I don't know enough about modern to specifically talk to the printing numbers and the collectability, the playability of the set. I'm sure those play a role as well. I do think that one thing Pokemon Go has for it is you will see a lot of cross collectors like myself that typically aren't very involved in modern, but like that connection to something that we are familiar with, whether it's Pokemon Go or like we talked about celebrations earlier. So I do think you will see a larger consumer base just because of that. Whether or not that's enough to offset the massive printing numbers or what those printing numbers look like, I'm not your guy to comment on that.
Yeah, I don't get into all the print run numbers and speculate on all that. I mean, look, let's just leave it at this. There's more printing now than ever. And the reason is because there's more demand now than ever. Now, is that going to be too much printing for the amount of demand? Is that going to offset? Are we going to left with tons of supply? I don't know. I have no information, no inside information. My guess is going to be good as anyone's channel you look at. And so there's really no reason for me to give, opinions on it because they're just literally just baseless opinions. And so that's why I don't like to get into the print run and all that type of stuff. But so Zach Fate had a question. And again, I know you just said you're not really into modern, but if you want to jump in on this at all, you can. Do you guys see modern slabbed cards ever rising in price long-term, 5+ years? I'm sitting on about 200. I bought raw and graded. Bad investment long-term? You want to go first on this one?
I would generally be pretty bearish on modern slabbed cards unless they are specific ones. Like we need to have ones that have such a low pull rate and difficulty in grading where there's something special that's going to make them more scarce than others. But again, when we're talking about that 9.1 billion cards produced by Pokemon this last year, comparatively being like the next highest year of printing that they've ever experienced was 3.7 billion. That's a lot of cards. So I feel like if there's a saturated supply there and it ever becomes profitable to a certain point, those packs will get broken, those boxes will be broken, more will be sent in for grading. So I do think there's a cap on what the long-term investability will look like for most slabbed modern cards.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I know Jake says it all the time, Pokenomics on his channel, and I hate to say the same thing, but without knowing the exact cards, I can't give any type of realistic expectation. I mean, what is modern? I mean, if you're talking about like maybe early XY modern, like if you're talking like maybe you got some silver Dialgas or some Flash Fire, Secret Rare Charizards, like those cards can probably perform well. I mean, they're lower printed, they're harder to grade, they're really hard to get 10. So if you have some like XY based Venusaur Blastoise and 10s, or like I said, Silver Dialga, Flash Fire Charizard, any of those types of cards in 10s, that's going to be a lot different than having like a, full art Evolutions Charizard PSA 10 or, any Sword and Shield PSA 10s. That's a completely different story. And so, yeah, it really just depends on the card you have, how hard it was to grade. Like, I mean, you can go back to the population reports. I'm not too keen on those because, you can misread those depending on the era and how many were graded. But yeah, I mean, it really just depends on that. I will say if you had the cards raw and graded them, you probably just saw the biggest increase in price you're going to see for a long time. Like that's the biggest way to increase your value on cards is to grade them from raw to an upper grade, like a 10 and a 9 on some. So if you're wanting to like if you're going to see like that same return just holding them, I think most people here know how I feel about holding slabs. I mean, I think it's a more slow, steady game. And I think the biggest money is made with the grading. Would you agree?
Yeah, and actually let me boomerang back to that because you brought up a point that I hadn't really considered, but depending on your entry point with the grading as well, if you got in with those 200 cards at the lower grading prices, part of what we might see with some cards, again, depends on which ones we're dealing with, but if that grading threshold never drops below $20 or $30, then there's going to be a floor for a lot of cards because nobody's going to bother grading them if they're not going to recoup that money back of the actual grading fee. So that's one of the things I would speculate about a little bit is if we're seeing like $30 becoming the norm for graded cards, probably not going to see a lot of like PSA 10s or PSA 9s for, decently desirable cards ever drop below that. again, it does depend on which cards. And this is where the fundamentals come in, which is, your rarity, your scarcity, your condition, the historical value of it, the popularity of the actual species of Pokemon. I think those questions matter. That context matters in this type of question.
Before I read this next one, I forgot to ask you about that. So you do you pretty much agree with SM Pratt on that older rarest Mr. Better?
Generally, I do add a couple additional fundamentals to mine, where it's not just the age, the rarity, and the condition. For me, it's 5 fundamentals, and for me, it's rarity, pull rate is the rarity. For scarcity, how many are actually on the market or in the population report. Then condition, which might be tied to rarity and scarcity in some situations. Popularity of the actual Pokemon. Obviously, a Weezing isn't going to demand the same type of price as a Dragonite, regardless of what set we're talking. And then lastly, the historical value of it. Like if there's something unique or a story or an interesting release or something like that behind it, I think that's intrinsically going to draw more people to that item because it means something. So I think it's a combination of those 5.
Yeah, I like that historical value. I haven't really thought about that as deeply, but yeah, I always take out those first 2 with like SM Pratt saying, because like the older, that really doesn't mean everything. Like, I mean, base set's old, right? Unlimited base set's old. That doesn't really mean much, right? I mean, you can still get base set 10s, for a lot of the cards under $1,000, like to this day, but like, so I'm always more like, yeah, popularity needs to be in there. And then also, I mean, see, older, rare, minter, better. So I'd be more like, more popular, definitely condition be on there for sure. But, like you said, pull rate, like scarcity, I guess that is rarity, but it's like, what rarity are we talking about? Are we talking about rarity based on pull rates, or rarity based because it's back in the day and people didn't treat their cards well, so it's rare, to find a mint card? Like there's so many variables that play into that, where I just don't think that saying really holds up nowadays. I mean, because you got Moon Umbreons going for as much as literally PSA 10 base set. It's 20 plus years newer, right?
Well, I think that's why you delineate rarity, scarcity, and condition, because all 3 are intertwined to some degree. But rarity would be more about like, how difficult is that card to actually pull or to attain if it's not from a pack? Like, how do you get it? Where the scarcity is how many are available on the market. You might have a card that's not particularly rare, but if it's collected and off the market and not available, well, that price is going to go up. Even if it's temporary, maybe more flood the market later on. So scarcity can be a moving target at times. And then condition is that condition.
Well, like there's really like tons of cards though that are rare that still aren't really worth a ton of money. Like just like when I was like collecting WotC, and like, or like I guess first generation stuff, like there's all these weird cards, like you were talking about, like the W stamp. There's like the Australian stamped Pikachu. There's all these like weird, I guess promo type cards that they're really rare. There's very few copies available, and they're old, they're mint, but it's like they still don't hold the values that a lot of cards nowadays or modern sealed product does. And it's like, so it can't just be old or rare, right? I get the minter, I get the more popular better. I get like having a story, like you said, like having a historical story behind it. But it's just like older, rarer, it just isn't holding up in every circumstance. Like I get it's a good, I guess, starting line to start at, but just to tell people, oh yeah, older, rare, minter better, it's not gonna hold true every time.
Yeah, and I think if Scott were here, he would definitely agree with that and say it's a guideline. It's a general point. It's not the end all be all. And I've heard him say that in several different videos. That's just his tagline. And I think in most situations it does apply, but I would personally add in those extra couple of fundamentals that I think need to be parsed out even more, even though they might be implied by some of the other ones, or they're different enough that maybe they should be stated as separate entities.
Yeah, I get it. So Alex Saunders, question: how much of your success, speaking to both, has been intentional from a financial sense, or just luck of enjoying the hobby? Do you think the boom potentially forgave some mistakes purchases? All right, you go first.
If I'm being honest, a lot of it is luck. I would like to think that my engagement in the hobby and my level of knowledge and spending the countless time to figure out how does grading work? How can I effectively appraise cards and pre-assess condition from a distance? How can I factor in the different expenses that go along with that? Where there's a lot of learning that has to happen to be successful in the type of thing that we do as collectors and as graders and whatever. So I do think there's an element of skill involved. But when I entered the hobby, it wasn't like there was massive amounts of money to be made here. That wasn't the goal. That wasn't the attention. And I came in at a point where the cards that I wanted were readily available. A lot of people look back and they're like, if only I would have been around, then I would have bought up all this stuff. And it's like, well, I don't know if you would have, because there wouldn't be a major incentive to. There wasn't money to be made doing that. Maybe you could flip some stuff and make most of your money back, or maybe turn a little bit of profit, but we're talking like pennies on the dollar. So I think a lot of it was the luck of just being engaged in the hobby and wanting to collect long term. And over time, those things appreciated in a way that I never could have fathomed. And so in that way, a lot of the reward was luck driven, where I would have been probably equally committed and happy with the results if nobody ever got into Pokemon and 2016 never happened, if 2020 never happened. I don't know if that would have changed anything for me. But along the road, there was a number of learning experiences and different skills and strategies that I had to pick up. And so I do think those have enabled some of that luck to happen. So if I had to put a percentage to it, maybe a 50-50, maybe that's being too generous to myself. Maybe it's more of like a 70-30 of 70% luck if we're talking about the financial side, 30% skill, 15% concentrated power of will.
Waiting for it.
5% pleasure. Can you finish this?
I can't even finish it anymore. I know it though. I know it.
Just aged myself again.
God.
Can you name the band?
Love. Or is that right?
I'm sorry, you glitched up on me. What was it?
Is it a Fort Minor?
You got it.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yep.
So it was a singer from Linkin Park.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mike Shinoda.
Right. Yeah, so my answer is gonna be a little different. It was all skill, no luck. No,
a lot of modesty there too.
It is a little different though, because I feel like first of all, I have a very unpopular opinion, is that I wish none of this ever happened. Pretty crazy because of how well it kind of set me up financially. I wish it would have continued to rise just like you talked about from 11 to 16. I wish it would still be like that, because I wish it was still just that regular steady growth. You just kept buying and buying, and over time it rose kind of like a mutual fund would. And because that's how I was treating it, I think it was, obviously I think the amount was luck. I wouldn't say it was all luck, because like I said, my first year or so that I was in the hobby, I was just collecting, I was just spending money. But then when I realized it was more of an investment, that's when I really did start kind of putting my funds in places where I saw growth in the future. So I was buying things literally just to make money on. Like I was buying things that I would rather have other things in my collection, but I knew that, these things were going to have a better chance of growing in value in the future. And so, 90% of the things I bought after that were based on, hey, what is the best possible place to put my money to make money on these in the future? And my friend that I, do all my investing with, is what we talk about is the luck was the time frame. So I saw these type of gains in like 20, 30 years. And it just so happens that it happened in 1 to 2 is the way I always put it. Is so like, I think, I was right. It was just because it happened so fast, it made you look like a genius, where it was really all luck. But I think this probably would have still happened. I think a lot of these values would have still happened in 20 years. I think it was on that trajectory, just it was moving that way. Yeah, obviously the time frame just kind of threw everything off, and it went through the moon. And the reason I say that I wish it would have never happened is because I was one of those people how you were talking about, where you had, those cards and you were willing to take the hit when you knew it was going to fall. I wasn't, right? So I not only sold all the things I was invested in, but I sold all of my collection. Like I sold all my WotC boxes. I sold all my slabs. I sold it all because I didn't want to lose the money, right? I didn't want to lose the unrealized gains. And so, looking back now, it's like, well, yeah, but you can go buy it all back because now it's all, 30 to 50% cheaper. But I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to go spend hundreds of thousands of dollars just on Pokemon to collect it again. It's not going to happen, right? Because I've already put money elsewhere. I've got it elsewhere in my life. greatly improved our lifestyle because of that. Because I'm like you, me and my wife both have average incomes. And so, yeah, and those reasons, I kind of wish it didn't happen. I mean, I'm thankful it did. I'm grateful that it did for what it did. But yeah, I mean, I'm kind of indifferent because I don't have all those cool things I used to have.
Yeah, and I see nothing wrong with like selling in that situation. It certainly was a thought that had crossed my mind on more than once is like, man, I should just liquidate everything and leave, and then I can live a more comfortable lifestyle. But truth is, I live a pretty modest lifestyle anyway, and I don't know if there's a whole lot that would have changed, even if I had a whole bunch of money just sitting around to throw at whatever excessive future that I wanted to live. Um, and I'm still fine financially. Like it's not like I was really pressed for money. And I did sell some stuff and continue to sell some stuff. So I don't mind having like Pokemon as a side business. But I'm still here for the enjoyment of the hobby. And, like I said, I'm okay with taking some of that hit.
Yeah, and my intention was literally to like walk away after that. Like, I went through like 6 full months of just working deals and making trips and selling every bit of my collection, just basically wiping the slate clean. And I literally walked away and I couldn't stay away, right? I mean, I kept being drawn back into like these debates or like these threads on, unnamed online sites. I'm not going to name it because I'm banned from it. But yeah, like things like that. I kept getting sucked back in, and then eventually sucked me back into having a YouTube channel and continued and starting to invest in Pokemon again. But yeah, it's just funny. It's just Pokemon is a way to keep creeping back in our lives, right?
I think that's one of the important things too, is that there really shouldn't be any sort of threshold or any sort of requirement on how invested or how much immersion you need in the hobby to be validated by it. Like, even if you just have one card, even if you have 0 cards, if it's something you're passionate about, you'll find a way to be a part of it in some capacity. And so I think that's one of the things that sometimes gets a bad rap, especially by really experienced collectors that feel like they have some sort of superiority complex over others because of the collections that they've amassed. And again, I'm standing here with a fairly large collection as somebody that says, I think a lot of it was just fortunate timing, fortunate circumstances. And that doesn't make me in any way better or more deserving than anybody else.
I don't know if this is the same person that always says it, but maybe multiple people said it. But Alex Bruce, why does everyone wear hats while they're sitting inside their homes and desks? PK does it too. Here, I actually have hair. Like I said, I don't know. I don't want to do my hair or take a shower and wash it right now. It's easier at the end of the day to just throw a hat on and jump on. Maybe if I did a live stream in the morning, when I'm, showered and chipper, it'd be a little different. But what about you?
It's actually part of the multi-million-dollar endorsement deal where in every one of my videos, I'm legally obligated to wear this. I'm just kidding. For me, I am starting to bald. I do have hair as well. Not as much as you, slightly less. For me too, though, like wearing glasses, it's really uncomfortable to wear headphones as well, because then they dig into the sides. So the hat helps like push the headphones out a little bit and give a little bit of clearance. So that's one of the reasons. Also, I'm a teacher. I have to go most of the year without wearing a hat. And I love wearing hats. And I'm a hypocrite when I tell students to take their hats off when I am a hat person myself. So I try to wear a hat as much as possible when I'm not at school.
There you go. John Doe, which do you use for buying singles more, PWCC or eBay? What do you think?
For me, it's definitely eBay. I have browsed PWCC and used PWCC in the past before, more so when it was actually on eBay before it was separated into 2 different entities. I am definitely watching graded cards significantly more on PWCC than early on when they first separated from eBay. I feel like we're getting to that point where a lot of prices are getting to the point where I'm like, I see some potential or some opportunities there. So probably eBay though.
Cool. Let's see. I'm trying to find some more questions in here. If you see any you want to cover, just shout it out. Here, Ben Young, can you guys share your opinion on the Dragonite boxes? Investable, or are the EV boxes a better shot? I've got EV and PC ETBs on pre-order. Yeah, I think both those are definitely not investable. I dumped those immediately, going to 0. I'm just joking, Ben, man. Yeah, I mean, I think the EV ones are definitely hyped more, right? I think a lot of people were hyping those when they, first got released. Uh, I was saying that I wasn't pre-ordering them, and the reason is basically what we're seeing now is because it's not a Pokemon Center exclusive product. I mean, stores are going to have this; they're going to be sold all over. I know on eBay you can already buy cases for under $50 a box, so under that pre-order price. And so that's the only reason I held off on EV boxes. I mean, I don't know if those are going to drop, significantly or not, and have a better entry point. It's not to say that they're not going to, do well in the future. But again, whatever time frame you have in mind. But yeah, I mean, I think in my opinion, I think the EV boxes are gonna, I'm not telling, obviously not financial advice, not financial advisor. If I were to buy, I would rather buy EV boxes over Dragonite boxes. And yeah, I mean, as far as PCTVs, I've talked about this before too. I'm indifferent on them. It's just a new product. It kind of goes back to my mindset on like, Beanie Babies and, things like that. When things are marketed as collectible, I'm always weary, like, the PCETVs are marketed as this like, more scarce product or more, like they're basically being bought for collecting, right? So basically the majority of people may be buying those to keep sealed, when the majority of people buying regular products like ETBs and booster boxes might be majority of them opening them. And so that's why I'm just indifferent. I'm not sure if the price points are going to keep, rising faster than the regular products, but I could always be wrong on those. I'm not sure. Like I said, I'm not giving you like my answer saying, oh, that's a bad idea. It could be a good idea. I could be 100% wrong. I've talked about this. I will be wrong at some point. It's just, that's my mindset. It's marketed as such a collectible item. And I think a lot of people might be buying, those to keep sealed. Whereas I think a lot of the other product is being opened more often. So that's where I'm at with those. I know you don't like modern a lot, but do you have anything you want to add?
There's nothing of substance that I could add to that. It's
okay.
beyond my area of expertise.
Got you. Hey, Catch 'em all collectibles here. I'm just scrolling down the chat, so I'm sure he was been here for a while. Sorry, man. Thanks for stopping by. Let's see. Have you seen any questions?
It's not really a question, but a comment from Wesley saying it'll likely be sideways for a while into steady again. Same with stocks after they have huge volatility. There's usually a long period of sideways until supply and demand reaches an inflection point. So what are your thoughts on the current larger economic situation and how it may impact the Pokemon market?
I think it sucks. I mean, I think it's going to affect everything for a little bit. I mean, I just did a video on it and how, an average family is basically, if you're buying a house right now, at an average house price, you drive an average amount, spend an average amount on gas, you spend an average amount on groceries. It's basically costing you like $800 to $1,000 extra to live now, right? I mean, like a $300,000 house at 3% compared to, over 6 is now costing like 500 plus a month for the same exact house. Really less house because you get less house now than you did, back then. So I think it's definitely going to affect. I mean, $1,000, you could say, yeah, gas going up a little bit, it's not a big deal, but buying a house, gas prices, grocery prices, everything else going up. I mean, $800,000 a month is huge amount to regular people. And I think you'd have to be crazy to think it's not going to have an effect on things, right? I mean, I think it's going to have an effect on every industry. I mean, my industry with, landscaping, I think it's going to have an effect on even restaurants. I think there'll be probably less DoorDashes, less Instacarts, less going out to eats, coming up here. And yeah, less discretionary income putting into things like this. Now, there's two ways to look at that. I mean, it's going to be, maybe a bearish, short term. Could that mean it's a great time to buy for the long term? I don't know. On some things, probably. On other things, maybe they just never, recover to the extent that other things will. I don't know. But yeah, for the right here and now, there's definitely going to be some waves. Again, don't know how long it's going to last. Don't know the severity of it. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a very real concern. That's why I did that video. What about you?
Yeah, I thought that was a really good video, by the way. I did a similar one in March that was looking at a few different of the economic things going on. Part of it was inflation, part of it was interest rates, and how that affects people's debt, like especially credit card debt. And I think there's a figure out there talking about how the average family doesn't have $500 or maybe it was $1,000 to cover a typical emergency. So I agree. I think like the economic situation is probably going to get worse before it gets better. And especially as people are putting money onto credit cards and servicing their expenses with debt, that debt becomes more difficult to pay off. I do think it's going to have some impact. Maybe it goes sideways, maybe it becomes more volatile. I assume, and this is just me merely speculating, that we will see a continued bearish trend for at least a while. And what I've seen in the past when we've been in similar situations is often everything kind of goes together, not just Pokemon, but like stocks and uh, pretty much the whole market kind of moves in one fell shift. But within Pokemon as well, I do think there's going to be a number of items that are undervalued as a result that get swept into the mix, go downriver, and there's probably going to be some buying opportunities out there. And it'll probably be for the people that have some experience, that understand the market fundamentals, because I do think that's what separates, those better long-term plays from perhaps the not so good long-term plays. So I don't know. I think that's one of the things is people can look at life with a glass half empty approach and see all the negative, but there's always some positive there as well. There's always opportunity. So I don't know. I think there's going to be some opportunity out there for those that maybe are looking to build their collection and felt like prices were out of reach or maybe product was too difficult to find. Well, now's your chance to shine. And for others that feel like they missed the boat on the big investment opportunities, well, this might be your opportunity as well. I don't know. We'll see how it plays out. It's interesting though.
I see Mason in the chat, Cardinal Gaming. Thanks for stopping by, man. Still love to do a video with you sometime if you ever want to. So as far as like the whole economy thing goes, it's funny how fast crypto is no longer a hedge against the market, huh? Like that was like the whole saying forever is, well, you got crypto to hedge against a market downturn where they both just downturn together. So kind of goes into what you were saying. Everything kind of goes down together. Before I say this next statement is I want to make sure everyone knows, like, I want to say it again. We're both not financial advisors, not financial advice. Okay. And also I'm not at all saying that everything is going to 100% come back like it always does and like it has in the past. But if you look at things like 2008 with the stock market, if you would have, been holding at the highs of like 13,000s in the Dow, and then, it dropped to like the sixes, and then it recovered and came back and broke 13. Now it's, my point is depending on where you got in is depending on how well you did. And so, people who held all the way at the top and they're up at the 13 and then they held all the way through and it recovered. And now it's past that at say 15. Well, yeah, they're up a little bit, but when you buy on downtrends, when you buy at bottoms, that is when you make the highest amount of gains. And so when things are in these valleys, it makes that comeback that much sweeter, because when you do just get back up and reach the old highs, well, yeah, if you would have held forever, you'd be even. But because if you get in at those bottoms, you're making a whole lot of money as opposed to just holding. And so that is the thing you need to think about is when we are in these valleys, when everyone's scared and everyone's fear, there is that issue of, everyone's situation is different. If people do have credit card debt, probably not a good idea. If you're worried about your actual bills, probably not a good idea. If you have stable jobs, credit cards, no debt, you're putting into retirement accounts, you have extra money for entertainment, instead of going out and doing stuff, you want to put it into Pokemon, maybe a good idea, right? I mean, and maybe instead of going out to extra dinners or extra sporting events or taking an extra vacation, whatever it may be, I do think instead of doing those things, Pokemon's probably a better place to put money. That's just where I would do it. Now, again, your situation may be different. Your financial situation is always your own. For me, I'm anything above and beyond what, I put into like, safer long-term investments or after our bills are paid, I am dumping into investments in the market and investments in Pokemon right now, because even if it isn't the bottom, even if things continue to go down, I know it's a better spot than it was. And I still have that belief it's going to be better later. And so, I think that needs to be said, that this is if there are things you want, this could be a great buying opportunity for those.
Well, I'm also not a financial advisor. I'll make that clear. But the piece of advice that I would offer is be responsible. Don't overextend yourself under any circumstance, no matter how good of a potential investment you think something is, or how great of a return or how great of a buying opportunity it is. If you're being irresponsible with your money, it's a bad decision. Even if you win, it's still a bad decision. So having said that, if you are responsible with your money, if you have some discretionary income, it can be very difficult to time a bottom. And I wouldn't advise just specifically trying to do that and just guessing at where that is, but buy with a price you're comfortable at. And, I've already established this, but for me personally, if prices go down a little bit with my collection, no, it's not something I want to see. Am I prepared for that to happen? Yes. Am I okay with that happening? Yes. And that's okay. But again, if you believe that the long term of Pokemon is something that's probably got a positive outlook, I'm in that camp myself. I do think that the demographics are there, that the franchise being the largest grossing media franchise that plays to a very, very diverse market base is there. Well, I mean, there's probably a floor of what things are going to look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now. There is also a historical precedent of what things will look like, even with a much smaller base, like we saw in 2016, going back 2011. There's always been people there that enjoyed the hobby. And I can't see that shrinking. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But again, be responsible with your money. Don't overextend yourself. Don't be like, hey, I have these credit cards, and even though the interest rate on them is now 20+%, I'm going to max them out buying some unlimited base set Charmanders. Don't be dumb. Don't do that. Don't put yourself in that position.
And the time frames are unknown. So yeah, you know what? We could be out of this in 6 months and things should go up. It could take years. So don't go out and get those 0% interest credit cards for 12 months or 18 months or whatever, because that's just playing with fire, right? Because like you said, even if you're right, really it was a wrong decision, even if you got lucky. So don't do that. I wanted to draw attention to Catch 'em All Collectibles, Dan's comment. If you want to go check it out, he had a typo in there that said not, but it's actually financial advice. It says not financial advice, but that's a typo. So that is financial advice there from Dan. I know he's gonna love that one. I did see a question up here though from, who was it? All right, Wilt Chamberlain. Question: what do you do for sealed products that has loose sealed glue? I bought a few mythical squishy collections last year, and they all had defective glue, so they're open on the end. Ooh, yeah. So that is one of the risks of a sealed product. If you try to re-glue it, people are gonna know it's not factory glued, and they're gonna know they're gonna think it's resealed. They're gonna think other suspicious things. I don't have great answers for that. What I usually do when things are like that, or when it's like a tear in the wrapping or a crunch in the box, I usually just list them when I do sell them at like 5 or 10% under market, and they usually move pretty quickly. Because like the unpopular opinion out there, everyone thinks everyone's buying things to keep sealed. A lot of people are buying to open. And so if they can buy something with, loose glue or a rip in the box or something like that, and they can get it 10% less because they're going to open it anyway, that's why they still sell. And so, unfortunately, I think you're going to have to maybe eat the losses on that one. I wish I had a better answer for you.
That would actually be my answer as well. I put a lot of pride into the reputation as a seller and making sure that everything is legit and that people are happy with transactions. So always disclose any flaws that you have. And, it's probably worth taking a little bit of a loss on an item, or maybe not maximizing the profit. Just keep your customers happy and develop that much larger client base, because ultimately that's going to pay larger dividends than making that extra $5 or $10 that you otherwise could have made.
Yeah. Hey, Northwoods TCG's here too. What's up, man? Thanks for stopping by. There's people joking about like 401k loans and stuff, but I wanted to touch on that too, because that's another thing that's really going to disrupt a lot of things too. Is you touched on it, how people are loading up credit cards. So I personally know people that, had debt. They rolled it in their house because the house values went up, and they were able to refinance it, take a higher house payment, but get rid of all the debt. And that's going away, right? Because people who already did refinance, they don't have enough equity in their house now to refinance again. One, the interest, if they do have equity left, the interest rates now are double. And so are they really going to it's really the payment they're going to have is almost going to be probably as much as all the debt they have in payments. So why wouldn't they just keep the payments they have and keep the lower interest rate too? And so there is going to come this time where there's a tipping point where there's nowhere else to throw the debt. It's going to be, hey, I got to stop spending. I don't have anywhere else to go. I got to start paying this stuff off. and I can't put all this money into things. And yeah, before, honestly, like I know it's a joke in the chat, I get it, but there was people doing that type of stuff, you know, whatever, 401k loans, loading up credit cards, you know, refinancing, had extra money here, extra money there. Maybe their investments, they took chances on crypto or NFTs or, you know, Tesla stock, or there's, you know, and they had a lot of extra money. They took out of those and maybe put into Pokemon, or it was sloshing around. When everything's going down, none of that's happening. And so there is going to be a lot less money to be playing with. So yeah, anyone who's worried about like short-term liquidity, and you really had to get out, yeah, I mean, I think things are going to be going for lower prices. Now, that doesn't, like I said, again, that doesn't affect my long-term bearishness on Pokemon, but it always just comes down to that time frame. I mean, so many people have these short time frames, and yeah, you know, if you have these short-term time frames and you're trying to churn and burn product, you know, yeah, you're going to get caught in some of these items in this time. You know, not that you're going to be caught forever, but you know, we're caught right now, right?
Yeah, and you know, I've been the type where I've never believed in credit cards personally. Like, you kind of have to have one in today's day and age, and I use it incredibly sparingly. I don't know if I've ever paid interest on a credit card in my entire life. It's something I try to avoid. And just generally, that would be my piece of advice to people: is if you're utilizing debt to service your hobbies, you should probably rethink how you're dealing with that hobby. Now, again, sometimes certain debt is unavoidable, and I'm not trying to speak to that as, you know, an entire end all be all, but I think it's going to be a bad situation for a lot of people with the interest rates rising in the way that they are, and with prices of things going up across the board economically, where once that debt catches up to people, I think it's going to be a messy situation.
Yeah, like I said, but anyone out there who's listening to this that is in a good financial spot and they've like just not been wanting to pay the high prices, I mean, this is that chance, right? This is that time where everyone wants to talk about, if I was there back in 2015 when everything was that low, I would have bought it. Well, me and you were both there. We saw the prices every day. We logged on eBay every day. I saw that first edition base set box for $10,000 or best offer, and I never bought it, not one time. I had the money back then. I had the money in a savings account. I could have easily bought that box. No questions asked. Didn't do it, right? We could have bought all kind of WotC boxes, all kind of WotC slabs. We could have had probably everything that we want in our collection right now. We could have had back then at reasonable prices, but we just didn't buy it. And so we're going to get into that time now where things are going to get so cheap. And all the people that said, if only got to here, I'd buy. Well, you're going to have a chance here to put your money where your mouth was, right? So, you know, it's just, is that opportunity is coming.
Yeah, and I do think we have a significantly larger collector base of people that realize that there might be an opportunity like that again that they previously missed out on. So I do think the floor will be elevated compared to what it was in the past. And that's probably a good thing for most of us that are already in the hobby. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that those that have been frustrated with prices of cards or the inaccessibility of other cards won't have their day in the sun. And if you're financially prudent and you've been responsible with your money, and you're using discretionary income, there might be some good opportunities out there.
Yeah, that was a good point. I didn't mean to say that we're going to see like 2015 pricing. We're setting a new floor, a higher floor. But like, you know, anyone like a year or so ago that, you know, saw things that were, you know, way too expensive, you know, we've already seen drops. I mean, you know, there might be more drops, you know, even if there's not, you know, drops at like market price, there's always going to be people that need to liquidate things in times like these, and they're going to throw them at auction. They're going to be the women of the auction, and there are going to be great auction opportunities out there. So maybe the price as a whole, the item doesn't really drop over time because everyone who's holding and has their set prices out there, they're not going lower. You know, you could have, you know, 10 sellers all holding strong at $1,000, but an auction could come up and it could go for, you know, 800. It's not to say that the market price is now 800. It's just, you know, that seller had to get out of it. That was what on that day, the eyes that were on that auction were willing to pay. And we've seen it before. I mean, the next day, one of those other boxes could sell for $1,000, literally a day apart. So it's not to say that the items are dropping in value as a whole. It's just there will be opportunities out there for certain circumstances if you can catch them. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Any other questions in the chat? Hey, Nostalgia, this is anything and everything. Hey, Nostalgia, how do you think the upcoming Pokemon generation will affect the market? I mean, I don't really know what you mean by that. I mean, the same way, Sun and Moon came on after XY, and the same way that Sword and Shield came on after Sun and Moon. I mean, I don't think it really has, crazy effects. I mean, I think the biggest effect is if we see a new rarity, right? Is there going to be serialized cards? Is there going to be a rarity above alt art, above rainbow rare, above secret rare? I mean that I guess that could affect the market. That could affect cards and pull rates and prices. But as far as just like a new generation starting, I don't think it's going to be a crazy thing. Do you?
Personally, I think it'll just be an entry point for more younger audiences that then have that familiarity with whatever games it was that brought them in, just like everything else did, as you mentioned. And that's one of the great things about Pokemon is it does have that appeal across generations and across different age levels, geographic locations. So I don't know. I think if anything, it'll just continue building our market base.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see any negatives coming from it. I mean, positives coming from it. It could, like I said, the economy's in a weird place, but it could increase prices of some Sword and Shield sets just because when eras, end, people kind of maybe get that click in their brain, like, oh wow, okay, Sword and Shield's done. Maybe it's time to start picking up some of these cards before they become, kind of older, like XY did when Sun and Moon got to the. So I mean, those things can happen. You might see some price action in some of the Sword and Shield stuff. But no, I don't see any negatives or anything or any like crazy positives. Like, hey, you got to pick up, these boxes of these cards now. Once that new era starts and stuff's going up, I don't really see anything like that happening. So I know everyone's always talking about the Arceus box. I know you don't really, not into Modern. Do you have any thoughts on the Arceus box?
I don't know enough to comment on it.
Yeah, I mean, this box has been so hyped by, I feel like, every channel. I mean, I think if you type in just like top 5 Pokemon investments over the past couple months, I feel like that Arceus box would be in almost everyone's channel. Like you go to any Pokemon finance channel, I think that box is in there. And so I don't know how to feel about that, right? I don't know how to feel about everyone pushing the same product. If that's, going to be a good thing, maybe I guess enough people are buying it out for the price to rise. I know it's a good box. I mean, I know the packs inside are good, but if people haven't realized, Cosmic Eclipse packs have dropped significantly. The boxes have not. The packs, though, like PK talks about it on his channel, is how 36 packs is not equivalent to a booster box, nowhere near. And lately, the Cosmic Eclipse packs have lowered to a point where it's nowhere near what a booster box is, right? And so I think that could be, it was a lot better right at release, but I think people maybe were breaking it down and doing that and taking, the easy money out of it, especially stores who were getting those boxes at, distributor costs. And so, but that could be a good thing. That could be a good thing for the sealed product, right? There could be less of that sealed product out there. I mean, I was searching for listings on, just single cards, and there are stores out there, okay, who have 50 card lots of Lance's Charizard V and Dark Espeon V from the Celebrations boxes, and they have multiple. Like if you buy multiple of these lots, you get percentages off. And so they had like 7, I think it was 7 available. So like one store has 350 Lance's Charizard Vs up for sale right now. And so if that gives you an idea of how many boxes are broken down because like the Celebrations packs inside became so valuable that it was worth it to break it down and have to ship the whole box, things like that. That could be happening with the Arceus, box. So that could have an effect on the price of the actual Arceus V card. The packs inside. There's a whole different line of scenarios that go into it. And so that's why I'm not like one of these super, bullish stonk, you got to buy this Arceus V box. I'm not saying it's not going to do well. I'm not saying it's a great product. I'm just saying, tread with caution, right? When you say that with anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the risk you run with any mass-produced product is that level of saturation. That sounds like what you're getting at with it.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, let's see, Northwoods, with the huge number of modern cards saved, packed fresh, do you think as the hobby grows enough to make alt arts, we'll see prices like Gold Stars, Level X, or shiny cards? I mean, that's such a hard question. I mean, I think some of them almost are right now, right? Some of those alt art, like the Umbreon's getting close to some of the lower level of those cards. So, I mean, I think it's already sort of happening close to, right? I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly what the price of all the tens level X's or shinings are. But I mean, the thing is as the alt arts age, the gold stars, level X's, and shinings are also aging, right? And even if like there's alt arts that are actually more rare. I mean, would you agree that the alt arts are more rare than those cards?
Than the other ones from the set?
Like a shining from Neo Destiny.
I don't know. The shining from Neo Destiny was generally like one per box.
Right. So it's
and
so
probably much smaller, significantly smaller print run from the Neo series, I would assume, than some of these newer modern sets.
Yeah. So and that's like that whole like modern the bullish argument on these alt arts is well, they're so much more rare. It's like yes and no, right? They're so much more rare to pull. Like they're a lot harder to pull. I mean, you could open cases and not pull what you could with the shinings, but there was so much less of that product than we have now.
What are the pull rates on the alt arts?
Oh, it's astronomical, I think. I mean, it's not even one per box. It might be like a couple of case sometimes.
Okay.
And so, but like I said, I mean, to pull like the alt art you want, it's kind of like the Burning Shadow Charizard, like how hard that is to pull. It's like, yes, it's so much more rare, right? It's so much more rare than any WotC, most every WotC set than a card was. The problem is there's so much more Burning Shadows than what the level X sets and the Gold Star sets and the Shining, the Neo Destiny, all those sets had. And so there could still be less of those out there, right? And, not many of those boxes are ever getting opened, where it's so much easier to go crack a Burning Shadows box or go crack any of these modern boxes because it's $400, $200, $100. And so we are going to see the populations and the amount of those cards continue to grow at a rapid rate where, we're not going to see the shinings, grow or the gold stars grow that much. And so for that reason, Northwoods, I mean, I'm sure you're in the same camp I am. I'm not sure they're going to hit those levels, but again, I'm not sure they need to, right? Because, it all goes back to kind of like for like, if you're going to buy a gold star for $3,000 or you're going to buy a bunch of alt arts for $300 to $500, your question is can those alt arts get to $600 to $1,000 before that gold star gets to $6,000, right? Doubles in price. And so I don't think they need to get to the prices those are to kind of outperform is how I see it. Now I want to hear your perspective on this because you are vintage over modern. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, all I could really do is make assumptions. I think the way you broke it down makes a lot of sense that, given the much larger number of cards printed in modern sets, but also grading wasn't really an intention and collecting wasn't nearly the type of investment vehicle back in some of those early vintage days, particularly when Neo was around, was a low point for Pokemon in that first initial phase. So I would feel a lot more comfortable with that. However, I'm also biased because I'm a vintage collector and that's what I know better. I do think based on what I know about the alt arts and the pull rate, I didn't realize it was that low on them. There's probably some validity there. If I had to pick one or the other though, I would go with the Neo Shinings for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I just think it's just one of those things where there's no way to get someone who's going to be non-biased, right? There's going to be people like us who, we see the Neo Shinings and it's going to be more to us. But then there's people growing up now that see the alt arts, and that is, I mean, we've heard like crazy stuff, right? Like to where the alt arts are going to be like the top 3 type of card ever printed or something like that. So we have people that are on the alt art bandwagon so hard that they like think these are going to be the best cards, right, in the future. Like we're not talking about like right now, we're talking about like in the future. People think alt arts are going to be some of the best like types of cards in the future. And so yeah, I don't know. Like I said, it goes back to that older, rare, American, vintage, or better thing that SM Pratt always says, and I don't like, is it's popularity, right? So popularity is going to play a much larger part than older and rarer on that, right? Because even if the Neo Destiny cards are more rare because there was so much less and there's less out there, and even though the alt arts are much harder to pull, there's going to be, you know, more because there's so much more open. It goes down to popularity. It goes back to, is there going to be enough people that want the, you know, Neo Shinings over the alt arts? You know, I talked about this before. If there's, you know, a 300 PSA population of a card, but only 3,000 people want it, that's not as good as there being, you know, 2,000 of a card, but 1,000,000 people want it. And so no one knows the numbers of how demand and supply are going to be. But if you're, you know, I don't think there's a bad answer on this. I mean, I don't think people, you know, obviously don't, you know, I wouldn't ever buy into the hype phases. I wouldn't buy in when things are at their height, like the Moon Umbreon. Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about moving into, you know, certain cards like that long term, I'm not gonna sit here and say it's a bad idea. I'm not gonna sit here and say, oh, that's a stupidest idea. Obviously, it's gonna be the Shinings. But I also can't say the Shinings won't continue to outperform, or the Gold Stars won't outperform, because they are so much more rare. They do have, you know, I guess a longer track record, more historical significance, whatever it may be. It remains really unseen. And I think I'm just always in the camp that I think the modern collector, all the people, all the eyes on the space now, I just think that's so much it's kind of pushed away to the side. And people always say that everyone's going to go back and collect vintage. And like I said, I think that's kind of to be determined. It's unseen, right?
Yeah, so I think this is one of the areas where we would diverge a little bit. And you know, when it comes down to popularity versus scarcity, I really see that as more of a supply versus demand type of argument, where if you're looking at popularity, it's like how much demand is there, and quantify how many people actually want it. Where if we're looking at the older, rare, mint or better thing, it's more about the supply, what has the low supply that's going to inherently draw in larger purchase prices. I do think it's a combination of the two, but I would personally lean a little bit more towards the rarity and scarcity side of things. And I think only because a number of different collectible areas have already bared that out. Like if we take an item that doesn't have nearly as many individual buyers that are actively seeking it. Like again, we go to some of those vintage video games like the World Championship cartridge. It's not on a lot of people's mind unless they're a pretty well-known, or like they know the landscape of the video game market. Or you take items like in Magic the Gathering, some of the early stuff, the Black Lotus, the Power 9. Even though there's a smaller buyer pool for those items, they do significantly better because that buyer pool itself is significantly more established, has more financial means, and is taking their hobby significantly more serious than those casual collectors that make up the majority. So that's where I'd push back a little bit. And it's okay that we can diverge here. I don't see any problem with that. But I do think it should be a combination of supply and demand. But if push comes to shove, I would lean more towards the items that have the scarcity behind them.
Okay, and so you're saying the scarcity because you're talking about like the card themselves or the grade?
Potentially either. And we kind of had this conversation already, but I do think those three pieces, rarity, scarcity, and condition, are all intertwined together, but I would separate them as three different things. But like obviously something that's a higher condition is going to be more desirable than something that's a lower condition. But I think what I'm looking at more is towards the rarity and the scarcity, like the items that are truly historically significant, the things that are like the pinnacle of that particular hobby, the vintage things that are connected to it. I would take those over whatever cards are wanted by the most people, but are significantly more available.
I got you. And I guess that comes just, you know, being the collector side, right? I mean, it comes down to what kind of collector people are. If they're collecting, you know, arts they like or cards they like or sets that, you know, are nostalgic to them, or if they're, you know, going off on that, you know, I want to have the rarest and, you know, most mint copy of this card, and I want to collect things other people don't have. And like I said, it all comes down to that of how many people, and that's the other thing, you know, we don't talk about is, you know, the market caps, right? Like how many people are, you know, or how many of those cards are out there compared to how many of the cards are going to be out there now. And so even though it has less, they're less valuable, they could have a higher market cap, right? Because there could be more graded. And, you know, if you have, I don't know, thousands graded of a $500 card, that's going to be more than, you know, a couple thousand graded of a, you know, $3,000, $5,000 card, right? And so that needs to be discussed, is like where the money is moving, right? Like where the most money is moving into these cards. And it's just the data is all over the place. I mean, it really is. Like you can go back to like first edition, WotC product or WotC cards, and they're going to outperform almost everything. But then you can go to some middle era like hollows that are graded 10s, and they aren't performing as well. And I think the reason is because there's just not enough popularity on those eras. Like there's a very, small group of people that like that a lot, and they have a lot of money and they're able to bid those things up. But that money can't go everywhere, right? Like that money does go to certain eras, and it just depends on if there's going to be enough popularity in every gold star, every shining, every level X to carry those in the future. Obviously, the high value Pokemon, they're probably always going to outperform. The lower value ones, like the less popular Pokemon, we might not see it, right?
Yeah, and I think that's a fair statement and a fair way of looking at it. Again, my point was more towards the idea that popularity is intrinsically more important than the supply. Again, I think it's sort of a supply versus demand type of argument, and I see that as an unnecessary wall to separate those two where they can coexist.
Okay, no, that makes sense. Yeah, like I said, I mean, it's just, I get, I'm like kind of arguing the pros of the alt arts, but I'm really on the fence on that. I'm not saying I believe either one. I'm just trying to make sure. I'm just trying to, give both sides of the argument, just because that's what we're doing here, right? I mean, that's what people want to hear is to hear both sides. I mean, I can definitely see your side as well. I mean, I'm definitely not saying that, there's not going to be enough demand for gold stars or shinings or level X's in the future, right? That'd be crazy.
Well, and likewise, I'm not trying to say that like the alt arts won't have any significance moving forward, because they very well could. And just by the nature of the argument that we're having, or the way we're framing this, I would say that that's really more of a supply type of thing than a popularity thing in the long term anyway, where if people are flocking to those cards because of how difficult they are to acquire, not just like the Pokemon that's featured on it, or how many people, like thousands of people that want this card because they need it for a deck or whatever that the case is. I do think that like that sense of exclusivity, that the supply being shifted in a certain way is something that generates demand. Like it's impossible to divorce those two.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I want to touch on Catch All Collectibles comment. I just think it needs to be talked about. So he said in 5, 10, 15 years, current modern can fade in the middle and massive print runs. In 5, 10, 15 years, the first sets are still the first historical sets. And so I think like your story is, a bit like kind of like not the norm. And, even Catch 'em All Collectible story, but like, I think the majority of people in the hobby story, especially that got in around our age, they were in 1999, 2000, 2001 time. And then we all got out until like 2016 or after. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely.
And so I think what my problem with that statement, Dan, is that all the sets that like back then that I remember as a kid, like, all of WotC, maybe getting a couple of the Neos, like that's the stuff like I went back to and started collecting. That was it. So I never even really knew about, Nintendo EX era, all the level X's, the gold stars. I was never in for any of that. So like, I know the gold stars, I know the level X's and stuff, but like those don't carry near as much meaning to me as like the shinings do, as like all the gym challenge, gym heroes, hollows, the obviously base set jungle fossil, like that all carries so much more meaning. And like if I wanted to just collect and care about them, I'd go back to those. I wouldn't go start chasing all these middle eras, because those are middle era. So saying like modern is going to be middle era, well, all that's middle era, right? So it's like, even if people did kind of like you said, go back and want to chase the vintage, well, what is vintage? Like, they're going to go back and chase the first, right? Like first edition base set, maybe like jungle fossil first edition, like the very first stuff, maybe like the Black Star promos, or like the very first. Like, why would people go back and then like settle in the middle somewhere just because stuff's expensive? Like they're going to go settle like, oh, I got to buy all these level X's now. And that's where like there's a disconnect for me, right?
I might be misinterpreting this, but I think you're actually supporting Dan's argument there. Is he's saying that what makes those first sets so special and impervious to what some of the middle sets and modern sets will experience is they will always have that historic value of being the first sets, that they have something intrinsic about it that when people want to go back to the origins, that's where they have to go.
Right. And so that's why I think, like, I'm gonna put this the right way. So I think the biggest amount of people got back in, around when I did, and then also around like now, like through the Logan Paul boom. So I think these are going to have a lot more, kind of nostalgic comeback than like the middle era stuff. Like there's going to be modern eras that we come across, like maybe some of Sun and Moon, maybe this next era. There's going to be eras that we come across that aren't going to have that draw, that are going to be middle era, that aren't going to, it's going to be a flavor of the week type thing. I just think like, especially like Evolution's XY time, maybe like early Sun and Moon, definitely Sword and Shield. There was such a massive amount of people because of Pokemon Go, because of the Logan Paul hype, that people are going to remember this time, and they're going to want to come back and collect these alt arts. They're going to want to come back and collect, like from the rainbow, whatever it may be, they want to collect, but the things that they couldn't afford then, but now they can. And so I just don't know what's going to draw them back to like a black and white, right? Like what's going to draw them back to like things like that. I get being drawn back to like base jungle fossil we grew up with. I get being drawn back to what you came back in the hobby. Like me, I'm always, Evolutions will always have a special place in my heart. Like the XY era, that'll always have a special place because that's where I started collecting. Those are the first packs I started opening again. So I guess that's what more I'm saying is like, no, there are going to be more dead times in the hobby where they're not going to have as much pullback. But I just think a lot of the modern we see right now, like Sword and Shield, XY, they're going to have a lot more pullback than I feel like a middle. What do you think?
Yeah, so I would first say that like any era is going to be nostalgic to certain individuals. Like there's always new collectors that are entering at any phase, whether it's 1999 up to present. There were larger spikes, and I think that's the point that you're making is with a number of collectors returning in 2016 with Pokemon Go, or now with Logan Paul boom and Pokemon's 25th anniversary in 2020 and 2021, that'll be a place where a lot of people kind of ground themselves. And I think there's probably some truth to that. As far as what would take people to other eras, I think once they explore that area of nostalgia, it's not uncommon for people to take their journey elsewhere. I do think that most of the time that road leads back to origins, back to the beginning, back to the classics. And, that's my bias, Pokemon classics. But along the way, I think people are generally seeking those places that are not explored as well as others and that have some level of rarity and scarcity to them. And that's why I think the E series is such a popular area for a lot of people, is that production numbers were so low there that those cards are aged enough where they're very difficult to find, maybe some of the most difficult cards in all of Pokemon to find. Now, whether or not that generates as much interest or long-term growth as some of the other areas in the hobby, I don't really know, and I don't feel qualified to make that judgment. But I think sometimes that's the benefit of being a middle set or being one that's overlooked initially, is then that going under the radar is what then makes it more appealing later on.
Yeah, I mean, I think what it comes down to is it always comes down to money, right? And I know we always talk about like, oh, later in life, when you're more successful, you'll have money. Let's be honest, okay? We have to talk about things in terms of like averages, because we can't, obviously there'll always be CEOs or big time surgeons, but average people, okay, even if they get more successful, move up in their company, make six figures, whatever it may be, these old cards like WotC era are all very expensive, and even people that make money, it's going to take them probably their lifetime to collect all those sets, right? And so spending $1,000, I mean, a lot of WotC, most all WotC, cards are what, 1,000 plus in tens. And so when you go back and you have to start doing this, like from people, like I said, move from modern back to that, start from scratch. I mean, how are most people going to make it to those middle eras, right? Like, how are they going to have the funds to continuously make it and push those prices up? It's only going to be the people that have the funds, or maybe have a established position in the hobby where they're really just trading money in these cards for money in those cards. But like, to come in with fresh money and fresh cash and throw $5,000, $10,000 into these cards, that's very rare. I mean, it's almost seen like being portrayed as normal in Pokemon, but a lot of the people making these purchases, it's either trades or they've sold other parts of their collection to buy new parts of their collection. They're not just coming in writing $10,000 checks out of their checking account or savings account. So I think that needs to be discussed, right?
Well, I would start by saying that I don't think the vast majority of collectors will be pursuing PSA 10 first edition vintage cards, and that, using that as the goalpost is maybe a bit unfair. But I do think, like, if you're looking at binder sets, or you're collecting just like maybe you're a species collector and you're looking at some of the earlier sets and you're like, you know what, I want all of the Blastoise cards that are out there. You can come by an unlimited Blastoise relatively cheap, especially if you're looking for something in like near mint condition, or it doesn't have to be a PSA 10 grade. And so I do think there's room for your average collector there, especially if we're talking people that are more established later in life, don't have to be a multimillionaire. We're talking people that have a little bit of discretionary income, that have goals. And that's one of the things that's appealing about this hobby for people that are collectors and not just investors, is the experience is it's more than half the fun. It's most of the fun is chasing down those things. And I think for a lot of people too, they don't just like enter and go, all right, I'm going to chase the most expensive cards in the highest condition. I'm going to hit the ground running. Let's start off with first edition PSA 10 Charizard base set, and then we'll go from there. You might start out with that copy that looks like it's been run over by a U-Haul truck and immersed in sulfuric acid for an hour. And you go, you know what, this cost me a lot of money, but I'm proud to have this one. And then eventually you finish out the collection. You're like, all right, what do I do now? All right, I'm going to chase condition a little bit. I'm going to try to upgrade some of these. I think that's the more natural course that people take when they're collecting.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. Hey, Jake Pokenomics in the chat. Thanks for stopping by, man. Appreciate you. Let's see. He says, people also like to collect certain Pokemon. It is not just about the era. Gen 1 fans tend to like the rare cards of their favorite Pokemon from every era. For example, the middle gens have the lowest print runs, and so it can offset the greater demand for WotC. Yeah, that's a great point too. Like I was talking about with the, Gold Stars, Shinings, the, level X's, is the popular Pokemon are going to rise, to the heights, but, the less popular ones, they may stay lower. And, that's why I said some of those, newer cards could end up, pushing past them. I mean, I don't know if there's been, Jake would actually know more than me. Jake, if you're still here, let me know. I don't know if there's been any sales of like those kind of real low, like, never sold, like a XY, XY full art Venusaur or Blastoise from XY base, or like PSA 10 Flashfire Charizard, or PSA 10 Silver Dialga. Like, have any of those modern cards have had actual like publicized sales? Because I think some of those cards might be getting up close to, what some of those level X's or some of those other cards are in the same condition, because, I don't know why, because obviously, it's hard. Maybe they're harder to pull, they're harder to get in that condition. They, what else? Like, I don't know if it's more popularity. I guess the Pokemon are more popular than the level X or the Shining or the Gold Stars of those Pokemon. Now, when you compare apples to apples and say, well, yeah, compare the top Gold Stars to the top, it's not even close. But like, that's why I always aid on popularity, right? Because like the popular Pokemon, no matter what it is, no matter if you look at a WotC, a level X, a Shining, a modern, the more popular Pokemon are always going to outperform. And so that's why it's hard to like make a whole blanket statement across every era. Is you have to talk like, well, what is it? The high end ones, the low end ones, the mid, what are we comparing, right?
Yeah, and that's what's tough about blanket statements just in general. And obviously with those popular Pokemon like the starters, you're reaching a lot of different collectors there, because you might have the people that are set collectors, you might have the individual species collectors. Like, there are people that are just working on complete Charizard sets. And so part of that is the scarcity and the rarity too, because some of those print runs are significantly smaller for some of those middle sets than others. And especially when you add grading into the mix and condition, and then you end up with cards that are not very easy to find. And that level of scarcity also plays an impact on the price. So again, there's a lot of variables here that we're mixing together. It's difficult, and that's again one of the fun things about the hobby. And maybe part of it, as we said earlier, is luck, but there is a little bit of skill as well, because you learn these things over time.
Yeah, and Jake did, bring up those cards I was talking about. They have super low pops because, before that, like I always kind of take the first 4 XY sets out of kind of like the rest of XY, because they were such lower printed. The print runs were not as good, so it was a lot harder to get 10s. you know, when you jumped into like Roaring Skies Primal Clash, they got reprinted, and, you know, Evolutions had a million print runs, and a lot of the older sets were easier to grade and easier to pull, right? Like this, I mean, the Silver Dialga wasn't super hard to pull, but it was harder. This, you know, Secret Rare Charizard from Flashfire was harder to pull. But even like the Evolution show, I mean, Evolution is obviously one of the most printed sets ever, right? That PSA 10 Charizard still holds a lot of value. Like, I don't want to misquote sales because like I did on that one video, you know, like looking at false sales on eBay, but I think it's still a $2,000 card. I mean, I could be wrong, but I think
Sounds about right.
I think it's selling somewhere in the 2000 range. I mean, one of the most printed sets ever, a $2,000 card. And we are talking about some very rare, very scarce cards from older eras are that price. And this is just a reprint. So, I mean, that's why I think a modern needs to be given some sort of look. You know, it's not all about the older, you know, the rare mints are better, right? Because that card's not old, that card's not rare. You know, it is mint, it's popular, right?
Well, again, my fundamentals are rarity, which it's not, scarcity, which it is, because it's a very difficult grade and there's not a lot of copies available. So
scarcity and popularity, mints are better.
Very popular. I would even argue that Evolutions does have some historical value. This was the first time we saw the Wizards of the Coast original artworks reprinted, which I think was a difficult licensing agreement that Nintendo had to work through to get, you know, the okay to do that. So I would even say that despite being such an overly printed set, it does have some of that history behind it. So it's not just the age of it or the popularity, it's a combination of things.
Yeah, and obviously we're in such a you know, obviously this post-boom era, we're all trying to figure out what the real, you know, the real trend is going to be in the future, because everyone's, you know, saying, oh yeah, the Moon Umbreon, those are going to crash like crazy, they're going to reprint it, and those are going to go, you know, way down. It's like, yeah, I mean, Evolutions, the Charizard, you know, 10 hasn't crashed like crazy. You know, I think it's enough times went past. Like the Burning Shadows Charizard hasn't crashed like crazy. It's seen the downtrend that most every other, you know, card has seen, but it hasn't crashed. It's holding pretty steady. And so, I mean, I think just the rarity and the pull rates of like those cards and the scarcity of getting that 10, I think those hold up cards, no matter if they are older, if they are, you know, from sets that are massively printed, because just for one, the popularity, how hard it is to get the 10, and then how hard it is to pull. I mean, I think those main things really drive the modern prices. And I think like a lot of people who, you know, like yourself, maybe, you know, aren't really used to that from vintage, right? Because it's a whole different ball game. You're looking at vintage stuff. It hasn't, would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like the two are not synonymous at all. There's a lot of differences, but some of the things are the same. Like I would still argue that the same fundamentals that I would apply in one area apply in the other. With our example of the Evolutions Charizard, for example, I think that checks a lot of boxes of why a higher price is warranted for that card. But you're right. I mean, they're two different ball games.
I mean, but like, okay, speaking about like, you know, reprint sets, I know a lot of people are against reprint sets. I know I've seen it in the chat a couple times. I mean, just think about that though. Like, again, don't want to misquote numbers, but I believe the PSA 10 version of the base set unlimited Charizard is still sub $10,000, right?
Probably.
I think it was going for like in the eights, maybe nine. I mean, I know there were multiple auctions that ended there. Again, could be fake. Don't jump all over me. But Jake, he's still in the chat. He could tell us. I'm pretty sure it's like $8,000-9,000 card. And so you're talking about like the very first set ever. You know, I know it's unlimited, not first edition, but you know, it's the oldest set. And, you know, it's got everything going for it. It's only about 4 times more than a set that was just printed a few years ago. It's like, you know, 15 years older or whatever it may be. And so that's what kind of gets me thinking like, well, maybe this modern stuff isn't as, you know, worthless as people make it out to be sometimes, because you know, a modern card is literally just a reprint of the base set is holding, you know, a relatively close value compared to years to what that base set Charizard is still at today.
Yeah, so I'd counter first by asking what's the population in PSA 10 of the Evolutions Charizard versus the Unlimited. I imagine it's skewed significantly lower population for the Evolutions one, because I know how terrible that print run was and how difficult those cards are to grade. So I'm assuming it's a lot lower. But even then, you're looking at the Unlimited Charizard as like the third variant of base set, the one that that's the odd one out. I mean, the better comparison would be compare it to first edition Charizard, compare it to Shadowless Charizard.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I would disagree there because I think I mean, you could say it's a reprint because it's not first or shadowless. So it's a 20-year-old reprint compared to a modern reprint, right?
Yeah, I see where you're coming from.
The print runs are actually almost the same, or the populations. I think the population for the base is like 449 for 10. And then for the evolutions, it's if these numbers are still accurate, it's 394. So they're pretty accurate. Or they're pretty similar. If those numbers are accurate. I got them off PokeData.io, so I didn't get it straight off PSA. So
what's the price on the evolutions one right now?
What PokeData puts it at?
Sure. It doesn't, it's just a ballpark.
They put it at 2350, and then they put the base set at, let's see, 9700. So yeah, I was close. But it looks like there were sales that ended lower. So yeah, I mean, it's an $8,000 to $9,000 card. The other one's like a 2,000 plus card. So, I mean, for 15 plus years, it's relatively close, for a card that's supposed to be, so overprinted and not, no one plays with them nowadays like they did back then. They're all, put right into sleeves out of the pack and sent in. I mean, I don't know. It just doesn't sit very well, right? I mean, like I said, there's tons of, I mean, I could probably find a lot of level X's or other, very rare WotC cards that, don't reach a $2,000 price point. Right.
Well, yeah, for sure.
With similar populations. Yeah. There's a lot of 400 pop cards that don't reach that price point.
It sounds like you're asking me, is Charizard a popular Pokemon? My answer to that is yes.
I was asking that, doesn't popularity, trump rarity and old and rare sometimes?
Does it trump it? All the factors come together. Popularity is one of my 5 factors. It's 20% of what I appraise.
Okay.
I think that's giving you more than enough.
I got you. I gotta put you on the spot a little bit, No,
in all seriousness, if you're saying like, would it surprise me and do I think it's accurately assessed for a modern Charizard like the Evolutions one to command a higher price than a PSA 10 Dark Weezing from Team Rocket? Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me, because I would say that card checks more of the boxes and has a much larger base that's looking for it than the Dark Weezing does.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm not sure of the numbers again, but like even like the Moon Umbreon, right? Like, I'm not sure like how the numbers on the population portion go, but like I said, I mean, I'm not sure if they still are, but I know a month ago when I was looking, there's unlimited base set cards going for $500, $600, $700 in 10s, where that's already going for that as a 10 and it's brand new.
Yeah, that also doesn't surprise me.
But like, I mean, it's the popularity. I mean, the base set with a lot of the base set cards like Alakazam, Mewtwo, they still have the same popularity. So I mean, it's not just because it's a Charizard. I mean, there's other Pokemon that have popularity, and it compares very well to older cards, even being modern.
I mean, yeah, but it's a cherry-picked example that's isolating just one factor, because I could throw back at you PSA 10 Heracross. Who likes Heracross? That card's worth more than, probably an entire case, multiple cases of modern.
I got you.
So I don't like being pigeonholed into like one factor when I think it's a combination of different things playing out together. And what I love about like the Umbreon is, well, one, Umbreon is like the best, not the best Pokemon ever, one of the best Pokemon ever, but it's got a large popularity base, like you already said. In terms of the rarity, it does have rarity going for it, maybe not to the extent of some of the, more difficult rare cards out there, but it has a lot of factors. It checks a lot of boxes. Does it check all of them? No. Am I saying that all modern is terrible? No, not at all. So again, it doesn't surprise me.
Hey, Pokey Grindin's in the chat. He's always the one that donates in super chat every time, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for stopping by. Jake was saying, hey, Jake, can you clear this up? You said I have 50 of them, still a ways to go. Are you talking you have 50 PSA 10 Evolutions Charizards? That'd be incredible if you do, man. That's a crazy position if you have that. Trying to see if there's any other, did you see any other questions out there?
No, I was reading that from Jake too, and I was wondering if I read that right.
Yeah, is that what he meant? That'd be crazy. Yeah, I'm not sure if I mean, that's how it looks. That's how I'm reading it. But no, I mean, I think, like I said, I'm not trying to disagree with you. I mean, I think you're right about a lot of that. You know, I think that people like they are going to do what I did when they got back in the hobby. They're going to go back and collect things they like. I'm just wondering where that ends. Kind of like with me, like I have a special place in my heart for XY, but that kind of ends there. Like it doesn't spill over to Sun and Moon. That's why I have the mindset I have is just because I want to collect like a lot of XY stuff, it doesn't spill over and be like, oh, I got to have all these rainbow rares from Sun and Moon too. And that's kind of how I feel about WotC. It's like, well, if I want to go collect WotC, it doesn't spill over and say, well, now I got to go into Nintendo. Now I got to get EX. Now I got to get it. Just that's why I'm worried about like how much of that's going to spill over to those middle eras, right?
Yeah, and to be fair, I don't know if I can even answer that well because my collecting area is very distinctly defined. It's basically base set to Neo Destiny. I dabbled a little bit in some of the e-reader sets as well. I have a complete legendary collection as well, which I never really intended on getting, but just was part of a much larger collection purpose. And I was like, I kind of like these. I'm going to keep these. So I don't know. I don't have experience going into some of those middle eras or even the more modern eras. But the longer I'm involved in Pokemon, the more I start learning about them and other things like the Japanese promo cards, trophy cards that originally weren't on my radar at all. So I do think there is validity, though, that the longer people stay in the hobby, the more immersed they are, the more that perspective broadens. And eventually you start discovering things that you otherwise wouldn't have. So I don't know where that starts and stops. That's probably going to vary based on the individual. But I do think there's probably some validity to the idea of people branching out beyond what their initial nostalgia was or what their initial collection goals were.
Okay. Yeah. No, I mean, that makes complete sense. You know, it can definitely happen, especially, you know, the size of their budgets they have. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Jake and Dan were joking about that. I got you. Jake says, scarcity is different than rarity. There are cards that are not particularly rare, but are quite scarce due to the high demand, low amount of people willing to sell them. Yeah. I mean, always, right? And that's with everything, with sealed product as well. I mean, there's always going to be that kind of dichotomy between, you know, well, the card wasn't actually hard to get, but no one's selling it. It's all off the market. I mean, I think that's kind of primarily people's problem with sealed product is they constantly go back to that. It's not rare, right? It's not rare. It's not rare. It's not rare. And I've never said it's rare. I mean, I don't know if anyone claims it's rare. It's just, it becomes scarce and that's what makes the prices rise, right? And I think the same thing's true with cards. And that's why, again, like, I'm not attacking you. I just don't like how Scott puts it. And that's why I always attack that older, rarer, you know, I get the minter. I just always attack that older, rare because it's really more popular, more scarce minter better. Because I feel like the popularity and the scarcity can far outweigh the older and the rarer a lot of the time. That's just where I'm coming from. I mean, you don't have to jump in on that. I'm not trying to put you on the spot. It's just, I just feel like there's those things usually play a more role than just saying, oh yeah, something's old. It's gotta be worth more, or, you know, something's rare. It's gotta be worth more. Well, you know, if no one wants it, you know, the rarity doesn't matter. You know, something's scarce and a lot of people want it. That's going to matter a lot more.
Right. And also like with each one of those factors, there's a large threshold of what that's actually going to look like. Like you could have a card that's extremely popular, but so mass produced and so easy to acquire that the price never does anything. Similarly, you could have something that's incredibly rare that nobody wants, or you might have something that's incredibly scarce, like a PSA 1.5 Diglett card or something, again, that nobody wants. So it's not just one factor outplaying the other. It's all the factors are working together in some sort of tandem to create both demand, but demand that's driven by supply. Like the two work together. And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with when communicating, myself included, because it is a difficult thing to conceptualize, is that it's not just this factor versus this factor. It's how do these all gel together for this particular item?
Yeah, I gotcha. Here, this is kind of, I guess, modern and vintage. There used to be some jumbo cards. What do you guys think of Pokey Grinding says, what do you guys think of jumbo cards? What is the displayability worth to big investors? I don't know. I'm not sure about that. When you get back into like the box toppers of the old sets, some of those do fetch some pretty high prices. So I guess they're quote unquote big investors in some of those cards. I mean, talking about the newer stuff, I don't think any of those are reaching any type of investor level. I haven't really paid attention to those box promos that were coming out back in like XY, or when they started making those jumbo cards again. But even like if you go back to like the jumbo base set Pikachu, the jumbo like legendary, where there's like all 3 legendary birds. I forget when it was released, but there's like that jumbo back in the WotC times. There's a lot of jumbo cards that really never gained any value. I think you can still pick them up now for sub $100. And so as far as like investing in jumbo cards, I mean, I'm not really about it. I did just when I purchased a Celebrations Completes, master set, because I wanted it, and I purchased all the Celebrations jumbos with it. So like all those jumbos they released and all like the box promo jumbos. So I have those. Those are some of the only jumbo cards I own. But yeah, I mean, I think they're cool. I mean, I don't know about investing. What do you think?
Yeah, I find them kind of gimmicky personally. I do have some.
Yeah.
In particular, I have the Legendary Birds one, which I won. I can't remember what I had to do to get it. I think just get some points from the Pokemon Tour, which was traveling around to different cities doing their qualifier for the Super Trainer Showdown. And so I remember that was really cool because I had one of those, and it was in my box with all my other cards being drugged back and forth to League every week, and it's all bent up and just terrible condition, but has some memories associated with it. But as far as the jumbo cards, they're not something I would pick up for any sort of financial purpose. If anything, the ones that I have are just because of the memories.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same here. And like Dan said, catching on collectibles, the vintage jumbo good, more jumbo, modern jumbo too small. I actually experienced that because the older jumbo, I have those old jumbo cards and they don't fit into the modern binders they give out. They're just like hair bigger. And so it's like Pokemon completely switched up how they do it, which is really weird.
Are they actually smaller?
Yeah, they're a lot smaller, like a good amount smaller. Like not a ton, but like you can't near fit them in the modern binders. I don't know why they switched up the sizing on those. Maybe
I think the lack of consistency there would drive me crazy if like I was actually collecting them.
Yeah. Oh, same here. If I was like trying to put like a master jumbo set together, that would I hate because you couldn't store them. Sorry, Mason. I know it sounds like a broken record going over topics multiple times. Sorry, man. Trying to change it up a little bit for you. Do you have anything else you wanted to cover? Any other topics?
I don't know. I mean, we covered a lot so far. I don't have anything specific.
No, I feel like I touched on everything. I mean, you pretty much did a good job in your video when you kind of laid it all out. Like that was the biggest thing in the very beginning. What I wanted to, really talk about is like, when I make the data points, I don't have like these nefarious like schemes in mind. I'm just trying to show data that like makes sense to like the most people. And I just feel like the most people were probably 2016 time or 2021 time with Logan, 2020, I guess, right? 2019, 2020. I feel like that's where the biggest groups of people came in. And it's like those biggest groups of people are looking to like, the best places to put things. And it's like, it's really hard when you show like, oh, well, going back to like 2014, if you buy all these, this is where they'd be. It's just like, yeah, you're right. But is that realistic?
Yeah. And I appreciate the amount of data that you put into your videos, especially coming from somebody that only has a vague familiarity with Modern. And like I've said a couple times now, I'm actually surprised by how well it's been doing in the past few years, despite the production numbers and just the popularity explosion. But I do find it fascinating, and it has changed my perspective on Modern a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it all comes down to that limited budget. I mean, if it sounds like you're mainly just, doing it for your own collection, enjoyment. So, I mean, I'm sure you're not, really looking at, how to maximize every dollar you put into something. And, just because even if you could, like, not saying anything's guaranteed, but like, even if someone told you, hey, you have a better chance of, making more returns on these cases of boxes more than this slab, you're still gonna be like, yeah, I really don't care though. Like, I don't want to stare at a cardboard box. I want to have the slab on my shelf, right?
Yeah, part of it would be that. The other part would be like the process of buying collections and figuring it out and grading the cards and flipping them that way is something that I find more interesting. Also, something that might help me with my own collection goals if I stumble across something that I do need. So, just that works better for me. And I trust myself more to make those calculated risks than just putting something aside and hoping for the best. Like, I want that more active involvement. And I know you've mentioned that a few times that you're looking at like, what's the passive way to go about this that's relatively safe and easy to do. But I want the active engagement.
Yeah. I mean, so like speaking of like right now, like I always talk about like here now, are you still able to do that pretty actively?
To a degree, I haven't bought nearly as many collections in the last few years as those first few years, obviously. But I'm always looking. I'm always browsing eBay here and there. I get really busy with my job during the school year and making videos and doing other things and traveling on occasion. So it's not nearly to the extent that it once was, but still out there, still scoping it out.
Yeah. And that's why I asked Jake the same question. I've asked Dan the same question. Like I asked everyone pretty much the same question, just because like, you know, maybe I'm just lazy these days. Is could be what it is. I sometimes you have to look at yourself in the mirror. It's like, because I mean, I used to do the same thing. I used to really enjoy it and do well on it and built a great collection doing that. And I just feel like it's 100 times harder now than it was back then. I mean, I've talked about it before. Like, I feel like back then it was really just, well, how much money you want to spend? How many collections you want to buy? I mean, you could literally go on eBay in a week and you could easily spend, 10, 20, $30,000 buying multiple collections if you wanted to. And it really just came down to, how much risk do you want to take? How much collections do you want to buy? How much money do you want to have locked up at PSA while they're grading your cards, which back then was a lot cheaper and you got back to a lot sooner. And I don't know, it was a lot easier and more fluid transaction than it is now. And it's like, one, I guess I'm, lazier because I'm not trying to go learn all these different auction sites and pay attention to eBay and PWCC Gold and Heritage and find all these lots. And then the other thing is I'm just, I guess, because the turnaround times of PSA are so crazy and the prices are high, I don't want to go through that process and take those risks and take that time. And I guess that's kind of like what's turned me off on it in I guess the here and now, because I agree with you. I like to do that too. It was fun, breaking down the sets and being able to hold some of those cards in your own collection when you found them and sell the rest off for profit and rinse and repeat. It was a lot of fun and you can do really well. You can build collections and make a lot of profits. And I don't know, maybe I'm just, like I said, I'm just kind of lazy and not wanting to put in the work. I think that's more what it is.
I mean, maybe, but again, like we're getting older now and have other responsibilities and stuff, I'm sure. So that's part of it. And you're right, it is significantly more difficult now than it was. I think sometimes people miss out, like, though, where yes, the collections were easier to find and you had more raw mint cards available out there, but you really had to be good at that pre-grading phase, because if you submitted cards and it came back as like a PSA 8, you lost money on the grading fee. If it came back as a 9, you maybe break even, maybe make a little bit depending on the popularity of the Pokemon and or the scarcity of the card. But if you got the 10, that's maybe where you made a little bit of money. But again, that type of money you made wasn't that significant in comparison to what it is now. So yes, it was easier, but at the same time, it wasn't as financially rewarding from like an investment standpoint.
Yeah, that's 100% truth. I'm also gonna say something that's probably gonna, I'm sure Jake and everyone like you and you're gonna like hearing, is that although I can show, better returns on, things like modern sealed, the truth is what you don't have to make as good of returns on those higher price items to make more money, right? I mean, you can make 50% on a booster box, goes to 150 after selling and fees and stuff. You're gonna make what, 20%? Well, let's say $3,000 card goes up 10%, made $300 after selling fees, shipping, all that. You're up, a lot more money, less percent, but a lot more money. And so,
Right.
yeah, when you can start playing with bigger amounts and you can take bigger risks and things like that, yeah, you don't have to see as big of returns. And so even at the same time frame, if you wanted to put in the work and effort and you wanted to, you can afford to buy $3,000 of, sealed product and you want to put on the work and effort doing it. Yeah, I still believe you can do better. But at the same time, I mean, yeah, you can, you can buy a card and it can go up 10%. You can make a lot more than someone making 100% on a sealed box. So it does have a kind of a fine line there of, what your income level is, what your risk level is, how much you want to actually dedicate to items. I mean, you know how it is, right? I mean, you have low end, you have high end stuff, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so like back in the day, yeah, like you said, flipping collections, like, it was nice. It was exciting when you were able to make a few $100s or make $1,000 on a lot, where it's like, nowadays with some of the stuff, I mean, you're talking about having to spend like 5 and 10,000 and hopefully you make 3-5,000 on a lot, or back then that was just ridiculous. That was crazy. Right.
Yep. Yeah, it's a different landscape for sure. But as somebody that really enjoys doing it and really enjoys the collecting side of it, I like seeing those cards. I like getting them in my hands. I like coming across unexpected discoveries and occasionally veering down some collecting tangent where like I wasn't originally planning on collecting this, but here we are. So I guess I will. And that's part of the fun.
Yeah. Hey, Jake, and Pokenomics, not to call you out, man, but will you please just send me one lot that you bought with the price that and then the sales of when you sold those items. I just want to see one of them. Just pick one that you're finding these crazy auctions where you can make 50% returns. Cause I know you talk about it all the time. Like you just send it, privately through Instagram. I won't release it. I won't tell anyone. I won't like give your information away. I want to see it once because I take time sometimes where I really search around and every time I like see these auctions end, I price everything out. And I'm just like, this is like 15% over market value. Like after all the work's done, this is not even worth my time. I never find these crazy auctions where you can make 50% anymore. I could back in the day, but I don't now. So, I mean, what about you? Are you having that experience where you find these type of deals now?
I don't know if I would say 50% is easy, but regularly I will see lots that like, I'm pretty confident that if the condition is even close to my pre-assessment, even without grading cards, can make 20, 30, 40% if lotted them out all individually. There's a lot of time involved in that. There's a lot of work involved in that. There's a lot of uncertainty of how quickly are these things going to sell. So there's the liquidity aspect. And more often than not, it's just not worth the effort to me to do that.
What do you think about this? The Green Shiz Collectibles. Shout out to him. I'm going to be on his channel next week for a podcast. He said Heritage based on limited booster boxes just sold for $11K tonight. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what condition it was in or what. What do you take from that?
It's down pretty substantially from its peak, but if we're looking at First Edition Jungle and Team Rocket and Fossil, I think that's roughly in line with what those prices are. And those have tended to move in parallel with each other pretty closely.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds, I haven't paid attention since I sold mine, but that seems really low. I mean, that's less than half of what I got for mine. So that's kind of crazy. I thought they were still like high teens. I didn't know they'd reached that low.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see when everything shakes out and we get like the established, like what is the market value of this? Because we saw that massive increase and now we're seeing the major correction. But I am curious to see like once maybe the over correcting stops or maybe there's more correcting along the way, like where's the market factoring in these things?
Yeah, I mean, Jake's saying he buys them every week at 50% value. Like I said, I don't know where he's looking. I'm just not looking the same spots. That's all I got to say. Right?
I mean, Dan, did you actually win that box?
What's that?
Catch 'em all collectibles says I won that base unlimited box.
Dan, you being serious or are you just joking around? I know we've been joking around this whole time.
Yeah, he's pulled our legs a couple of times.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm inherently distrustful now.
Wow. 11-4. Thank you very much. I mean, I guess he's telling the truth. I mean, there's going to come a time here. I mean, we're getting to territory where I'm almost going to consider, trying to collect things again at those prices. I mean, if these start breaking the 5 figures marks, I mean, they start to become attractive again. I mean, what do you think? I mean, some of the first,
like I said,
ever made. Huh?
There's been a lot of things that I've been watching on different auction sites now that I typically wouldn't have, because I feel like prices are starting to get in that area where I'm comfortable buying, even if they're already graded.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder, I mean, obviously this has to, I don't know how it couldn't, but this is going to have to affect, I mean, I'm sure the single prices of base set, of unlimited at least. I mean, and if other boxes follow, I mean, it's going to have to affect, I mean, they don't, obviously sealed and slabs and singles, they don't move in tandem, like they don't move with each other. But at the same time, they do have some correlation, right? And so, if boxes are moving down that much, it usually will have an effect on the singles. I'm not saying it 100% is. I'm not saying they're going to, go down as much as the sealed product has, but I don't know. That's a little worrisome for me if I was holding it. And it's honestly a really exciting for me because, hey, maybe I will be able to buy some of that old stuff I used to have again.
There you go.
Right.
That's one of the boxes that's one of the boxes I am holding is a sealed. Actually, it's not sealed. It's unsealed, unlimited base set.
But you have all 36 packs, you say?
Yep.
What other seal stuff do you get into? Is it all vintage?
Yeah, probably.
Gotcha.
I don't have a ton of sealed stuff, but I've got some sealed individual cards, like some of the E3 Red Cheek Pikachus from the 1998 E3 convention. Few WotC boxes. I think I've got a first edition Jungle, first edition Gym Challenge. I have some other packs that are just loose. I don't think I have any theme decks. I'd have to look in storage for that. I might have had like a Blackout and maybe a Brush Fire deck.
Yeah, some of those theme decks, those are some of the weirdest things for me. Like when I sold out of everything, I thought for sure those were going to come back down just because they're just, you get the same exact thing every theme deck. There's no, Gambler's Premium. There's no, but like some of those theme decks, like the Gym Heroes, Gym Challenge theme decks, they just hold value. They're steady. And it doesn't really make any sense. I mean, I don't know. What do you think about vintage theme decks and why they hold the value they do? Like, it's not just because, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to take of it. What do you think?
Yeah, those are kind of a mystery to me too, because I don't really see the appeal of them personally. Like theme decks have never been something I'm particularly interested in. I'm wondering if people like have just collections of like complete theme decks. And so maybe there's a market there specifically for people that need all of them. And so regardless of which era you're coming into, which set, whether it's Gym Heroes, Gym Challenge, Team Rocket, whatever, because some of those decks, like the cards in them, aren't particularly good. Like the Team Rocket ones in particular, like nobody wants Dark Weezing. Nobody wants Dark Arbok. Like, why would you put those in your theme deck?
Yeah, it's so strange.
Like, I get it. It's Jesse and James, but still, it's not the strongest card.
Hey, Jake, I've been reading all your comments, man. Hey, so my question more of is, I know you've been saying how you get a lot of these things this much or that much under market. My question is have you sold them? Like, or do you just list them or do you just put them in your collection or investment and, I guess like feel that whatever prices they're being listed at, or you've seen sold listings at, that's the price. Because my question more is, have you actually found these, won these cards and then sold them? Because, I feel like there's a lot of stuff sitting right now. Like I heard there's a lot of stuff sitting on eBay where, you could have 10, like we talked about earlier, like 10 sellers having a card sit at, $200, but then an auction come and go for $130. And then maybe none of those other 10 ever sell. And then another auction comes and it sells for $140. Like, I mean, are we establishing different prices? Or is it really just you're finding one-off auctions and you are finding them that far under market and then you are making the sales and making money on them? That's really my question. Because yeah, I mean, I think there are auctions that you find very cheap deals on. My question is are we kind of like this base set booster box? Are we establishing a new price, or is it just a one-off thing where you caught it and now you are up on it and you can make money? Yeah, I mean, I think it's the state we're in right now is we really don't know. Are we setting new prices or are we getting lucky? What do you think?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
I feel like it was directed towards Jake.
Well, no, I mean, Jake can answer if he's made sales and actually realized those gains, but what do you think? I mean, do you think we're just in this time where we're just trying to create like a new like, I know Dan always says there's no, actual, retail price or actually market price of Pokemon product, but are we setting new like price ranges right now with these auctions, or is it just like these one-off things?
That's a tough question. I think it's a combination of both. Like in a lot of ways, I think the auction prices, sale prices are used as comps for future sales. And so in that way, we're looking at establishing a certain sense of market stability of where prices should legitimately be. But at the same time, I think you need more than just one or two sales to actually develop that market line, that trend.
Right.
So I don't know, but I do see like new prices reflecting in some way the most immediate previous prices. So I do think at some point we're figuring out where the bottom of this market is, or I'm assuming it's a bottom. I don't necessarily know that it is. It could be falling even further. Yeah. And I think that's normal. We saw that in 2017 after the boom in 2016. We saw it to a degree before that even. When was the last time? 2012 or something had a much, much smaller correction for some cards, but I don't know.
Well, hey, I got like this fun question to throw out there. What are you collecting right now? What areas are you actively searching for yourself? If you don't mind, if you don't want to say it, don't worry, because you don't want to screw with the prices. But did
you say what set am I looking at?
Well, no, just what area, like what sets or what areas are you actively like looking to add to your collection? Or are you just like, are you trying to upgrades on stuff you already have? Or are you just looking for new cards? What is it?
Yeah, the primary goal is to finish off the PSA 10 sets that I'm working on. A lot of those are basically intangible to me. I'm priced out of a lot of those, so probably won't happen in the immediate term. As far as other things that I'm looking at collecting, there's some like small niche areas that I'm looking at going into, like some of the early WotC promo cards. We were talking about this earlier, but the W stamped cards were ones that I was like, it could be a fun little side collection to do without too much effort. I mean, they're mass produced enough that they should be able to be found. There's some larger ticket items that I've been wanting for a while that probably won't be attainable, but maybe. Like I have a complete trainer deck A, but I don't have a trainer deck B. So that's one that I've always wanted. Things like that.
Like loose, like all the loose cards?
Yeah, I ended up buying one that was loose and slightly used. So most of the cards are like near mint plus. I was really disappointed that they didn't have the original deck box though, because I like keeping like empty booster boxes and stuff for display purposes. And so I really want the box too. If I could find just the box and buy that, I'd probably do that.
Hey, and speaking of jumbo cards, I guess it's not the W stamp, but like those best of game promos, a lot of those had jumbos, I think, with them as well, didn't they?
I think so.
I think some of those best of game winners, like maybe like the Mewtwo, and I forget exactly which ones, but I think there were actually jumbos that went along with those. But yeah, I know those wizard stamps ones. There's, like I said, there's all those really cool like little WotC like promotional like type, I guess, sets back then. But like I said, it's weird how those can be more rare, more scarce, but not have the value. That's why it always throws me when I research all that stuff, right?
Yeah, for sure. Like another one that I have is I've had for a really long time this complete legendary collection, and it has all the reverse hollows. They're probably PSA 8s or above. Haven't submitted any of them to grading, less because it's not that I don't want them graded. It's just that once I start grading them, I'm sure I'm going to get a mix of 8s, 9s, 10s, maybe occasional oddball grades. Then it's really going to bother me until I like uniform them. And so I don't know if I want to take that on as a project, but I have those sitting aside in my like to grade pile, maybe, because I know as soon as I open that door, then it's going to be this much larger collection endeavor. And rather than just being like 16 to 20 holographic cards, we're talking a massive 100+ card set. So I don't know if I'm ready for that yet, especially at this current grading price.
Yeah, that's why I kind of switched to like those top loader binders, and I just like I have the sets and top loaders and keep them just because I'm the same way. I'm so OCD about it to where, you know, like I'm cool with like not having the tens of like the super rare stuff. So I'll have like a full 9 set, but I gotta have the full set of something. Like it's gotta be 9s or 10s or whatever. I can't have like a 9, 8, 7, 10. I can't have all that. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
that's why
like
I was
that's
asking
insane.
with your sets. Are you like, do you already have like, full sets? Some are 9, some are 8s, and you're just trying to upgrade them, get 10s. Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, so my WotC hollow sets are all 9s and 10s. Some of them I have in complete 10s. Others, there's like just 1 or 2, sometimes 3 cards that I'm missing in a 10, where they're cards that I'm probably never going to find or be able to afford, like the Yanma from Discovery. It's too hard to find. So that one's a 9. Most of the rest of the set is 10. So that's the ultimate goal, is to upgrade some of those. And if that doesn't happen, which it probably won't, and that's okay, then it'll just be picking up other things and maybe building some other sets that I didn't originally think I would get into, like this legendary collection set that I mentioned. Maybe if I start grading those, I think I'd be happy with 9s across the board. Like getting 10s in a complete reverse legendary collection is too ambitious for me.
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking those same type things, like especially like first edition base. It's like, I'm not gonna get the 10s. So it's like, how much do I care about the condition, right? Like maybe I just get a set of 7s. You start playing that mind game. It's like, well, it's already not going to be the creme de la creme. So it's like, do I even need 9s? Maybe 8s are fine. Maybe 7s are all right. And you start playing that game with yourself as the prices get higher. Do you do that same thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody does to a degree, especially if you are seeking that uniformity of grades and knowing that there are certain cards that are so low in population that probably never going to get them. So for the time being, I'm fine having somewhat of a mixed match, but I don't like PSA 8.5s. I'm just going to say that. I don't want any half grades.
No, especially when the disparity gets so ridiculous too between the 9 and the 10. Like, a lot of cars have like a relatively normalized disparity. Then you get those cars that are like 10x plus, and you're just like, okay, maybe the 10 isn't worth 10x what this 9 is, when this 9 could have graded a 10 on that grader's good day, right?
Yeah, and that was originally my intention when I started collecting, was I just wanted 9 sets. But from my first couple grading submissions, I'd get a few 10s, and I was like, maybe I'll hang on to those for now. And then eventually got a couple more, and then a couple more from grading. And then I'm like, well, I have half the set now in 10. I might as well finish it. So that's kind of how that evolved. It wasn't like I hit the ground running like, no, I want the best and only the best. It was just something I stumbled into.
Yeah, I've had that question before, and I've talked about it. Is, people ask me like if I bought 10s, if I don't believe in like, me, not you, if I don't believe in like the long-term investment ability over modern, sealed. And it's like, yeah, I have, because of that exact reason, is because I graded a bunch and I was left with like, 13 of the 16 hollows and 10s. And I'm just like, well, no, I'm going to buy those 3 10s. I'm not just going to leave this incomplete. So like, yeah, I would do that. But other than that, no, I really don't run out and buy a ton of slabs these days. I mean, I don't know. Could be wrong. You guys could all be right. Everyone who loves vintage, and I could just be looking like an idiot. So, but I'm prepared for that. It's okay. I can take it. I'll actively get on here and make an apology video to every vintage collector investor out there.
I don't know if that's necessary. I think you've already established that you don't hate vintage.
No, not at all. Well, guys, I think we're going to wrap it up here. Does anyone have any final last thoughts, last questions we'll take? Before we do, hey, do you want to go ahead and shout out your channel and shout out anything you got coming up in the works?
Yeah, sure. Well, my channel is Pokemon Classics. Do a lot of like similar type of finance market style videos, as well as showcasing some of my collection from time to time. As far as things coming up, summer. I mean, I'm a teacher, so this is a little bit of time that I have off to recharge and relax a little bit. And I'm going to spend it doing the things that I love, which is partially making videos for YouTube and partially just relaxing and enjoying the great summer weather, because I live in Minnesota and most of the time it's like negative 40 degrees. So got to take advantage of this while we can. Otherwise, hoping to get out to Collecticon in Denver coming up in October. So hopefully I'll see some of you there. I know Alex said that you're planning on making it out as well, or
I mean,
trying
I feel like
to.
I have to, right? Like everyone's going. I mean, if I'm going to go to one Collecticon, I guess it's going to have to be Denver.
And I would love to meet some other people out there. I think that's the best thing from the hobby is getting those opportunities to socialize here on the internet, but more so in person. It's so much better.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I don't see very many questions coming in, so I guess we'll go ahead and stop it here. I think we went almost 3 hours, which is a long time, but you can never talk too much about Pokemon, right? So
It's true.
Other than that, like I said, I'll leave a link to his channel in the description if you want to check out his stuff. Some of the best, I mean, Pokemon content out there. If you're talking about video quality, editing, like actually putting in the work. I think everyone can pretty much agree with that out there. So thanks for everything you do, for the community and putting in all that work and effort into the videos, man.
Well, I really appreciate it. Kind words. And thanks for having me here. It was really fun talking with everyone and moderately interacting with some of you in the chat, but this is the best, right? I think it was Paul Rudd that said it on Hot Ones. Like, look at us. Here we are.
Here we are. All right, guys.